Yo guys, welcome to this elder fiction. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got banished and unlocked his hidden potential through rage? Part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Kumogakure no Sato. An elder man was meditating on top of some random boulder. If he had his eyes opened, he would be rewarded by the amazing sight that was Kumogakure no Sato, both civilians and shinobis doing their respective routines, children's playing around with their friends, basically, a view that would give him a good amount of peace. His presence reflected power, authority and wisdom. Some would say that he was on par or maybe even surpassed his long-time and now deceased friend Hiruzen Sarutobi if compared. His now long, slightly spiky white hair have almost reached his waist, you still could spot some red streaks on some random spots. There was a slight twitch on his eyebrow and slowly, but surely, opened his eyelids revealing a pair of warm purple eyes and, with a deep and gruff voice, he spoke out loud to no one in particular. Interesting. This chakra. Western gates. 8 figures were seen walking through the gates, 2 giant kanjis for cloud embedded into the equal giant gates, the confirmation that they have indeed and finally arrived their village or in Naruto's case, a 4-in-1. Though, he held an amusement expression after watching closely the antics of the group of friends and former team had with each other during the trip. During their way back to the village, they encountered the Raikage bodyguards who had introduced themselves as Dari and C, the latter scolding his leader for leaving them behind without any warnings. As they were now walking at a decent pace towards what Naruto assumed to be the Raikage's tower, he suddenly stiffened as if he was being watched. But just as it came, it instantly vanished in a split of a second. Whoever tried to get a glimpse on me is good. I almost didn't notice. I'm impressed. Vegito, who was walking besides her savior, noticed his body language and promptly asked, "Is everything alright, Naruto-san?" The former Konoha's Genin nodded and dismissed her worries with a warm smile that made her cheeks redden a bit much to slight envy of C, who had and still have a crush on the Kumogakure's Jinchuriki, though, he just put that on the back of his mind. The Kikbi's Jinchuriki momentarily shifted his head to the side, as if looking to a certain spot in the faraway mountains, and unbeknown to him, on that split of a second, he had locked eyes with another man. In the mountains. The same elder man let out a small smile grace his features as he locked eyes with this interesting fellow. He had to praise this young man's sensory abilities that were probably almost on par with him, and that was saying something. Only her distant aunt had revealed this much talent. Mito Uzumaki. Though, it seems he didn't have enough training if I was able to check him out of that split of a second. It was all I needed though, there's probably no one who could hope to match me when it comes to sensors after all. It seems there's another massive type of chakra flowing through him, but it looks like it's being restrained by something, and I couldn't get a read on it, interesting. It seems, after almost 2 decades, I'll be able to finally meet a fellow Uzumaki. He cracked his neck and finally standing up, popping a few bones here and there, a small breeze blew his dark red cloak that was enveloping his whole body, a kanji embedded on its back, was the only thing visible before he vanished, along with the winds that had picked up the pace. The same kanji read, Yuzu no Arakirk, Raging Vortex. Few hours later. Raikage's training grounds. In the clearing, stood both Yondai Raikage, and Uzumaki Naruto, former Konoha's Genin, now on the bingo book as in high A ranked with over 30 million ryos as a bounty with specific orders for capture on site and brought back to Konoha. When he discovered he has been placed on the bingo book, Naruto, in a rare show of emotions nowadays, had raised his killing intent to the point where the whole village felt it, even the Raikage who had revealed this information to him had sweat running down his forehead. But few seconds later and after several deep breaths he calmed down and his brain started to working in overdrive at this new and unexpected development. To get someone on the bingo book, one needs to get the stamp directly from the Hokage, and that was the part he didn't understand. Why would Tsunade place him in the book with such high bounty just for capturing only? He knew him being the Kikbi's Jinchuriki the stakes would be high, but something just didn't add up. Why would Tsunade do that? The tensions were high at the borders of Hai no Kuni, and if his toads were right, Konoha was on lockdown. No one apart from ninjas from that village could leave, and even then, they needed specific orders. This didn't go well on him as he couldn't even get in contact with the few people he cared about in there. But right now he couldn't dwell more on it as he faced one of his biggest challenges up until now, though none of them was going all out. Hidden in the shadows, a pair of purple eyes watched the battle in curiosity and expectation. From what he heard from the group that came with the Raikage and his fellow Uzumaki, this was some type of test, whereas the Raikage would propose him something, and if he was correct, he needed to make his move fast if he wished to complete his and his late wife's dream. For now, he would watch. Hajime. The busty blonde woman, named Samui, gave the signal of start before vanishing from between both mans as they locked eyes with each other, beepizing and trying to explore any sign of weakness one another gave. Right no yoroi. But the grunt, Raikage, who's known for having little patience, activated his armor where lightning exploded around his body and covering it, his speed, endurance and strength multiplying by many folds before he planted his foot on the ground and in the next second he was upon Naruto, his elbow surrounded by lightning ready to knock him out as he roared. Arab. Naruto, who has been shaping his body all over this years, was able to follow and he had to give it to the Raikage, the man was fast. He could probably replicate his jutsu, but he would need a few pointers as it didn't sound easy to sustain such jutsu. He murmured something as he saw eye upon him, everything seemed to slow down in that moment and Naruto immediately ducked getting eyes widen in surprise from the Raikage. Ton Kekai. K's Daikiatsu. His right hand shimmered as a layer invisible to the naked eye was formed around his hand before sending a devastating strike on the Raikage's stomach that sent him a few meters backwards. The latter gave him an appraising nod as he surely felt that. Ton. Senkin. Even if I'm not even close to my maximum speed, he dodged that like it was child's play. He was even able to penetrate my armor. So much talent. But. More lightning exploded from the Raikage's body, sparks danced even more widely around him and just as he'd done before, he tried to get an hit in. Keyword tried, as for the next several seconds Naruto dodged and countered every single blow. The Raikage and everyone watching had their minds blown away as they were in the presence of a young man, matching with ease the technique and the speed that their Raikage was so famous for. The figure hidden in the shadows narrowed his eyes at every detail, and every second the blonde-haired dodged and countered and had to whistle at what he was doing. He's not matching Raikage's speed, in fact he's making him. You're slowing me down, it was a statement, but that simple statement made Naruto smirk and reply. Yes, I put up a barrier around me, whereas the atmosphere is extremely heavy. Anyone's body that comes in its field unconsciously feels the pressure and opens up a chain of reaction inside as they are not ready or used to it, making that person to slow down at the sudden change for that split of a second, and the best of it all. The Raikage raised his eyebrow as he was indeed impressed by the technique that overall was a good counter to his own, though he had his doubts that would be able to stop his full speed. I'm not affected by it. A look of shock passed through Raikage's facial expression as he heard those words right from behind him before he was sent flying from a wind-laced foot near his spine. The figure that was in front of him shimmered out of existence, revealing it to be an afterimage. I didn't explain that this jutsu requires a lot of concentration and if there's just a simple slip, the pressure will disappear altogether, but they don't need to know that. Before Naruto could process his next move, his sensory abilities picked up the buildup on chakra, his body trembled a bit at the monstrous amount the person was giving off, he was almost matching a bijk. Don't need to fear me boy, I'm not killing you, though, I'll be roughing you out a bit so you can stop shaking like a chicken. Hearing those words, Naruto locked eyes with the unscathed form of Raikage, the shower of sparks dancing around his body was a sight to see, they looked like they could cut through anything, a smirk came over his features. I'm not shaking in fear but in excitement. In that second his cheeks bulged as he made an hand seal, before exhaling a massive cloud of dust from his mouth. This action actually made his opponent smirk. Ton. Sunagakure. He's smart, he knows he can't match my speed, so he's limiting my vision. Thanks to his even more augmented reflexes, the Raikage was able to shift his body as an arm infused with chakra was thrusted upon where he was, he noticed that his opponent overextended it, probably because of overconfidence. There's the opening. The bulky man immediately grabbed the arm and lifted it, in a millisecond he was behind Naruto, turning him upside down, and with a strength that many could only wish for, he slammed the whole body on the ground, a large spider web crack, and huge cloud of dust, and many sparks of electricity followed the impact, as he roared. Break Bomu. Naruto had his eyes widened in the whole process, he got overconfident that he would get an easy hit as he put up on a lot of chakra on that cloud of dust to blind the Raiden user, but it seems he underestimated the boost that comes with a Raiden no Yoroi. He braced for the impact as he called upon a chakra that he hasn't used since his training, as well as using his Doten chakra and making his skin slightly darker. Doten. Domu. Buam. The Raikage had to win slightly at the corrosive chakra when he was still on the process of slamming the Jinchuriki on the ground, but he wasn't a Kage for nothing, and his training with his brother B helped to make his body adjust to that type of chakra before backflipping and waited for the results. The spectators had to hold their breaths at the deathly attack of their leader, Yujito, and even Samui had a worried look, but before the latter could announce the winner, a maniacal laugh was heard from the small crater as a bloodthirsty voice reached their ears that sent many shivers to their spines. Interesting, I want more. Let's dance, Raikage. The dust vanished, and everyone could see now a layer of red chakra enveloping the teenager, a second tail forming on his back. Naruto could feel the insane thirst for battles he has longed since the end of his training resurface. That was one of the aspects that he gained during his 3 years while training. He lived for battles where you knew that the opponent was superior or was able to at least match him. Naruto took a step forward before he completely vanished from the spot. He was already standing behind the Raikage, his arm raised. Time skip. It's been 2 weeks since Naruto and the Raikage fought, though no one really won as they had to stop, otherwise they would level the entire village. The former knew he still had space for improvement. He still remembered the elder toad, Fukasaku, informing him that his body was now developed enough to use one of their secret techniques. He felt giddy just thinking about the prospect to learn from a being with over 100 years of experience alone. Though, he couldn't dwell more on it as he arrived at a specific location, still in Kumogakure, at the mountains. He held an impassive face as he shifted his body and gazed over the meditated form of an older man that gave him some flashbacks of his Jiji, the Sandaime Hokage. Said old man opened his purple eyes, already sensing his soon-to-be pupil, waiting and hoping that he got the expected answer. Naruto didn't fail him as his icy blue eyes gave off a determination that the elder hasn't seen in many years. I accept. Flashback. It's been 3 days since his battle with the Raikage. He was already full health, much to the annoyance of the latter, as he remembered the grumbling about damned Jinchurikis and their regeneration, and he was now strolling around some mountains, looking for a good place to train and develop some new techniques before the meeting with the Raikage, who said that he wished to speak with him about the proposition he spoke about before all this had started. As Naruto was walking, he suddenly halted and narrowed his eyes to some random tree, and with an even tone that matched his impassive face, spoke. Come on out, we are alone. There was a small breeze in front of him before without any warnings, smoker's sound, an elder man with long, spiky white hair with some red streaks, appeared. Naruto could tell this man was strong, and the first thing he noticed was that although he was old, he portrayed this kind of wisdom that he only saw on one of his precious persons. The authority he executed was no laugh either. He could feel he would probably lose here mainly because of his experience in the field that paled in comparison to this man. Though, he got an odd feeling as he felt his chakra, it was kinda similar. I see, you can even have a read of my chakra to that extent. I'm impressed. The older man spoke as if reading his thoughts, and that wasn't an easy thing as he had his famous poker face in place. Naruto pondered a bit as he detected no ill intent or negative emotions coming from the person in front of him. So, what do you want and why your chakra feels so familiar? The white-haired let out a chuckle before with a warm tone, you could even detect the passion the voice held at the few next words that would change Naruto's entire world. Oh, that's because our origins are the same. Naruto's breath hitched as realization hit him like a rock, and as he heard the man continuing just confirmed his thoughts. Yes, I'm an Uzumaki like you. I'm Jensi Uzumaki known as the Yuzu no Arakirk, son of Ashira Uzumaki, the Shodai Yuzukage. In that instant, Naruto gathered some chakra on his wrist and in a puff of smoke, a sword that made even the elder Uzumaki widened his eyes in shock, appeared and the latter murmured. Kaminakari. Follow that involuntarily statement, he let out a full grin not seen since his wife's death, and the next few words shocked Naruto to the very core, as a voice full of determination matched his eyes that, literally, lit up on fire. Such was the hope that rejuvenated on his broken heart. Help me on getting Uzumaki to stand up to all other nations once again. Let's make everyone remember why we were so feared and that they should have confirmed that we were really dead. Come with me and I'll pass everything I know to you, you won't regret. Think about it, I'll give you 2 weeks, meet me at this place, and I shall know your answer, my fellow Uzumaki. Time skip, still in the flashback. In a few hours since the conversation with another one of his kin. It came as a shock to him to know there was another Uzumaki alive and one that could tell him what really happened on the fateful night. He didn't know what to think, it was just so many things to take in a span of a few minutes, though, the offer was really good. If he accepted he would have a place for his precious people that he vowed to protect. There were too many pros to not accept. Right now, the main problem was in front of him. Raikage's office. Naruto instantly noticed the familiar faces of Yujito, Samui, Amoy, Kari, C, Dari and Killer B who he befriended as soon as he entered the village, all standing besides the Raikage who supported a serious look. As he settled himself in front of them, the latter started. Brat, you probably have already figured it out what I'm going to offer you, but, as a Raikage, I still need to make the official request. So, Uzumaki Naruto, do you accept joining Kumogakure as an active shinobi, swearing loyalty upon your new home, in case you accept, and protect it with all costs, even with your own life? There was many hopeful looks from the people who were present at the room, but they all got surprised and shocked when the young man in front of them bluntly said. No but. What do you mean no? Do you want to live the rest of your life as a missing nin? Huh? Everyone, including the Raikage, was surprised by this reaction, mainly because it came from Yujiro, who saw right after the negative answer. Nevertheless, the Yondaime let out a chuckle, surprising even Naruto. I guess that means you accepted the other offer. Ikibizunji narrowed his eyes slightly before it turned back to the impassive one, as he hummed in thought before opening his mouth to speak. Hi. That means he came to speak with you, but as I was saying before, Yugi-chan interrupted me. Yujiro let out an huff in annoyance, though she was still listening and curious who was the man that stole his man. My man? Ugh. Nibi is already influencing me. Ho, don't say the kitten, that was all you. Though, I'm impressed as you found quite a specimen. I would like to propose an alliance as soon as we establish ourselves in our new home. Jensi-sama told me that for the last decade he's been training with a few old friends, the new generation in the village in secret. Unfortunately, there's no Uzumakis besides the two of us, but that doesn't mean that they don't possess an extraordinary potential. I guess he was just waiting for the right piece of the puzzle to announce the return of Sunagakure. Raikage though preferred muscles over brains, he wasn't dumb enough to the point where he would reject such offer. He heard many stories about the legendary village that was Sunagakure and her shinobis. They were in possession of a lot of rare minerals, and the fact that they had, literally, a sea around the village, not speaking of their barriers that wouldn't let some foreigner enter, there were a lot of pros. I guess you'll be the Yondaime Yuzukage for you to propose such alliance with one of the 5 great nations, no less. Naruto thought over if he should tell him the truth or not, but since he could detect the emotions rolling of the man, he decided to not lie. No. I'll be getting trained by Jensi-sama, who will be the Yondaime. I told him already I had no interest of being a Kage. That dream was lost a long time ago. I'll probably be like his right-hand man and the ambassador in case this alliance goes forward. Raikage hummed in thought, a hand on his chin stroking his beard as his mind raced through the implications that this would bring. He had no illusions, as soon as the other villages get the knowledge of the famous Sunagakure's return, there will be a lot of blood and secrets that thought dead coming to the surface if the man named Jensi, who spoke to him about Naruto, told him the truth. He had seen the hatred still rolling on that man's eyes despite being an old man. He guessed it was because of the massacre that his family suffered. But there was a specific village that he held even more hatred than the others. Konoha. If the man told him the truth, then Konoha would be the talk in the town for many years. Or maybe there will be a bloodbath reminiscing the Clan Wars era, and with Uzumaki Naruto by his side, the Raikage seriously doubted the chances of the Leaf Village. But there was still many unknowns in the world. Like Kiri, Suna, the small country's Akatsuki. This will be fun. I've been itching to put some tree huggers in their place. As the Raikage of Kumogakure no Sato, I accept your proposition, though, we still need to have a meeting with the daimyo of Kaminari no Kuni. But I don't think there will be any problems. Naruto smiled for the first time since the meeting, everyone there was shocked at the turn of events. Yujiro calmed down as she heard the entire conversation and couldn't help to let out a smile as well at the prospect of seeing the man that captivated his heart soon enough. Maybe she could settle down in Uzushio. That would be interesting. Maybe when this all is over. I'm so proud of you, my little kitten. You should just get over with it and jump on him before he leaves the village so you can get full of. Nibi. Shut up. It's been roughly 2 months since the rescue of the Kazekage. Things got out of hand. The group consisted of Yuhi Kurenai, Yuzuki Yugao, Hana Inuzuka, Sumin Yuzuka, Shizune Kato, Mitarashi Anko, Hataki Kakashi, and the Ichiraku family were worried. The village was on lockdown. Since the news of the whereabouts of Uzumaki Naruto had gotten out, both civilians and shinobis alike were tense. The placement of said person in their bingo book didn't help the matters. The power he had shown during what was their mission that would result, hopefully, on the improvement in the relationship between both Sunagakure and Konohagakure was something that certainly left their minds boggling. It was something neither of them thought possible. The dead last. The dobe of the new generation. The outcast. Of course no one predicted that this person would be the future wielder of the famous Mokuton, something that their precious Shodai Hokage was so famous for, and that was not counting the prowess and the talent/potential without it. Everyone knew that he was now unreachable, at least not without a fight. Back to the group, they were shocked since the news of their, secretly precious blonde-haired was placed in Konoha's bingo book, and his high bounty was something that left them really confused with their Hokage. No one knew what was happening with Tsunade. They couldn't forget the day Shizune called for an urgent meeting with the group. Apparently, Tsunade's mind snapped after so much pressure from the council, the elders and some clan heads, and with the topic of one Uzumaki Naruto returning, was the last straw. But some, mainly Hotaki Kakashi, Shizune, the former being a very smart person and the latter for living with her master for many years, and unknowingly Shikamaru and his father, knew something was wrong, very wrong. They knew something was up, since the banish of Naruto she overcame the demands and the progressive power abusing of the civilian council, and started ruling Konoha with an iron fist. Even with the strained alliance with Suna, the many losses of alliances, no one could complain about the many hard decisions she made. They were proud of Senjutsu Nade being their Kage. But, suddenly, just after the reports from the Kazekage's mission had gotten out, everything turned upside down. Many Anbus, Jounins and Chiknins being sent to the borders, the decreasing year of the graduations, and finally the placement of Naruto in the bingo book. The group shared their opinion in the matter, and they finally came to the most probable reason or, in this case, person, behind all of this. Jiraiya. As soon as Shizune recounted what happened between the Gamasenin and Naruto, they instantly knew he was the culprit or the man who was somehow plotting behind the scenes. But then, another person that Kakashi suggested, and Tsume plainly agreed, came to the conversation. Danzo. It was no news, at least for the older generation, that this man was dark. His title as Shinobi no Yami was enough for that matter. They knew he wanted the Hokage's title since the Sandame's rule. He had tried many times to get Uzumaki Naruto under his thumb, but never got his wishes. But the main question was, how? A person can't just change his personality so drastically. Mainly Senjutsu Nade, a woman renowned for her independence in many topics. A woman who became the world's strongest Kunoichi. How was she being manipulated? Shikamaru, who had the highest IQ from Hai no Kuni, couldn't decipher this puzzle. Not without all the pieces. Not without knowing the darkest secrets of Konoha. Such as the Uchiha's massacre. Or the man known as Shinobi no Yami. Meanwhile, the group knew they had to leave Konoha as soon as possible, but with all of this changes they couldn't. A village being on lockdown meant that they needed a direct and specific mission from the Hokage, otherwise they would be followed instantly. They weren't about to underestimate the effectiveness of Jiraiya's spy network. And they didn't want to put Naruto in, even more, danger. Raid headquarters. Danzo smiled. The reports he had received from his latest servant was something that made him let out a rare emotion. No, his troops were doing amazingly fine. No Konoha shinobis thought about to ask what really changed. He was aware that Shizune Kato, the apprentice of his new servant, was a flight risk that would, eventually, notice something wrong. He had to put an end to that. He wouldn't mess things up after coming so far. FK. The shadow emerged from the corner and knelt in front of his commander, Dansm, waiting for his orders. Take this scroll to our little puppet. After a short hi, Dansm-sama, the figure vanished a second later to accomplish his mission. The root commander was about to start reviewing some other secret files, but stopped and shifted his eyes to the corner of his office. What can I do for you, Jiraiya? The grunt of what he could figure as disappointment met his ears before one of the three Sannin jumped out of the shadows and lined up to a wall, his arms crossed over his chest, as he met the gaze of his sensei's former teammate. Do you think it's wise to let them leave the village? Dansm didn't blink, though his eyes hardened a bit at the question. Don't assume I'm like my fool of teammate Hiruzen. I'll have 3 squads of my Anbu following them in the shadows. Here, his eyes darkened dramatically. And as soon as they complete the mission, they will be killed on the spot. Jiraiya hummed in thought at the implications. He still thought it was going to be a huge mistake letting this particular group leave the village. Someone like Hotaki Kakashi shouldn't be underestimated, and his motto of a shinobi must see the underneath of underneath could cost them a lot. He didn't know how right he was. Also, his skills went up a notch. He remembered catching a glimpse of his training during the last few years and even left him, a Sannin, baffled. On top of that, Shizune, Kurenai and Hana were going to be part of his team. Even if Dansm had, somewhat, tried to perfectly balance that team with an ninjutsu, taijutsu tracking, genjutsu and Iram nin specialists to avoid suspicions, he couldn't help but have this nasty feeling that something in this particular mission was about to go wrong and somehow leave a bad taste in their mouth. The last few years for Jiraiya have been incredible hard until recently. His teammate, Tsunade, gave him such a beating that left him in coma for almost a month. He still has many marks all over his body as a proof. As soon as he woke up, Tsunade had him, unofficially and secretly, banished. If the other countries caught this type of information, they would have been, most likely, invaded. With his banishment, he dedicated himself to his spy network and provide important information to Dansm. He had tried to locate one Uzumaki Naruto, but never caught an hair of him during the almost 3 years. And of course last, but not least, his research. When he heard the news about his return, in the Kazekage's rescue, he fumed at the vast improvement of the blonde skill. The brat even unlocked Mokuton. Neither Minato-kun nor Kushina came from the Senju clan, so how could that happen? He had tried to reach Sunagakure in time to bring his former part-time apprentice back to Konoha, but he hadn't been successful. The next was the confrontation between Naruto and Orochimaru. Rumors were that he gave the Hibi-Sannin quite a beating, though, in his mind, he didn't believe any of that. He couldn't have surpassed the famous Sannin in 3 years, right? He was snapped out of his thoughts as he heard the person in front of him, speaking. You'll follow them as a precaution and help my route on accomplishing their mission. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at that. He could probably take the 4 of them at once, even though he didn't know how much Kakashi had grown. But he wasn't a Sannin for nothing, even if he's already past his prime. Dealt with the first problem, Jiraiya hardened his gaze, a rare serious tone slipping out of his mouth. The problem has come up. There has been some rumors circulating around the elemental nations about Sunagakure. Ansm's eyes widened in shock at that, but Jiraiya's next words turned into fear. Somehow, they have rebuilt the entire village under everyone's nose. The elder tried to process the words, but his mind was practically blank. He wasn't expecting this. A creep smile emerged on his lips after a few seconds as he murmured. Such a gold mine can't go to waste. I'll make some plans so they can, at least, be useful again. A week later. Sunagakure no Sato borders. The tall, well-built young man, ice blue eyes and spiky, blonde hair with jaw-length bangs framing either side off his handsome face, though the same face supported a murderous scowl. His fingers were twitching while he ran at full speed on top of the violent ocean that surrounded his new home, wanting nothing more to grab the hilt of his legendary sword placed securely on his waist. The glimmering silver of Kusanagi no Tsurugi waiting to spill some blood. Urusp, his spy toad, had just reported him troubling news about a mission given, a week ago, to a certain group of people. At first, he was excited that the opportunity had finally arrived as 3 of the supposed members that would join him in the long run were leaving the village, but then fear crept his spine as he heard that they were being followed by unknown Anbu and 1 Sannin, Jiraiya. His high intelligence immediately put 2 plus 2 together and came to the real meaning for this mission. Shizune, a woman who rarely went out on missions, at least, without Tsunade, was a dead giveaway. He also knew that his former sensei, Kakashi, could probably come to the same conclusion, but he didn't know his motives or on what side he was on. Naruto had just been given the clearance that he could leave the village. His master and father figure, Uzumaki Jensi, the Yondai Mei didn't think twice and immediately let him go, knowing already what his pupil had planned during the last few years. In almost a month and a half since he joined the elder Uzumaki in his ancestors' home, Naruto had trained relentlessly, and true to his origins, he developed his own style in the arts of Kenjutsu, improved his Kenjutsu, whereas he developed the art of maneuvering 2 swords at once, making use of the Kaminakari and Kusanagi at once. Though, he grew leaps and bounds on Futon manipulation, taking it into another level. Like Enten that is the highest Kaiten level one can achieve, Futon has one as well. One that not even the Shodai Kazekage could properly control. Kaiten, the Typhoon release. The puff of smoke on top of his right shoulder broke Naruto out of his thoughts, though, if he was surprised he didn't show. He didn't even acknowledge the toad's presence as he kept running towards Kawa no Kuni, the land of rivers. Naruto-sama, you need to hurry up. Kakashi is stalling off Jiraiya so Kurenai and the others could get away, but the Anbu caught up to them real fast and are currently fighting them. The sheer numbers of them will eventually be too much and they will eventually exhaust themselves. The scowl darkened at the statement, his eyes started to produce lightning sparks at the amount of hatred rolling off inside of his body. No time to waste. A single natural lightning shoot out from the sky straight to his body as Naruto clapped his hands and as soon as it hit him, his whole body, mean cells, started to work in overdrive. Let it be said that a bolt of lightning contains 5 billion joules of energy, but Naruto, who completely mastered the lightning's nature, could turn it into like a Red Bull energy drink. His Uzumaki cells, which gave him a natural high physical and regeneration prowess, and the Bijk sealed in him, helped in the matters. If it was a normal person, he would be, instantly, cremated. But he wasn't normal. Amanari no Nagar, thunder flow. And he vanished in a thunderclap. A few miles away. True to Jiraiya's fears, Kakashi had been worried since the mission had started. While following them, he heard him speaking to the members of the squad, Kurenai, Shizune and Hana multiple times, discreetly. He wasn't able to hear the conversation due to if he got any closer, Kakashi was bound to notice his presence by the smell or other means. It didn't take long for them to complete the mission, which was a proposition for an alliance with Kawa no Kuni. The daimon had immediately refused it as soon as he read the first paragraphs of the scroll stamped by the Hokage. Such one-sided agreement was unconceived. And just as they left the small country, they were immediately surrounded by unknown Anbu with blank masks. But Kakashi knew better. And it was at that moment that he knew the real meaning for this mission as he glanced over Shizune. They want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But now there's no doubt that Tsunade is somehow being manipulated. Just as he finished that stray of thoughts, another man, now known to the four of them, appeared and that person made Kakashi curse as this just to another notch, and he knew that their chances of surviving were now minimal at best. But the plan effectively made in less than 5 seconds, he went with it. He would, at least, protect this team no matter what, knowing what they meant to his precious former student. 15 minutes later. It's said that shinobi battles are quick. Sometimes it doesn't take more than 5 minutes to finish one. But when ninjas of high caliber fight, it sometimes can go on the other way around. Just like the whole battlefield that was once a beautiful clearing, it changed. The ground, trees and even some random small buildings were completely destroyed or scorched to the very core. Two battles happening with some distance between each other but, nevertheless, not less destructive. An exhausted Kakashi was kneeling on the ground taking deep breaths, gazing over the BP man, some meters away, in front of him. He, too, was bruised as blood covered some parts of his body and busty lips that made him grimace every time he tried to make some arrogant remarks. But he knew he had lost, the man was just better than him, as he could nullify the Sharingan from the many battles he had in the past. He watched as Jiraiya leapt in his direction, cracking the ground he stood in the process, a compressed ball of pure chakra materialized on his right hand. The white-haired geezer roared as he thrusted his arm forward. It's over, Rasengan. Kakashi's world seemed to slow down, he doubted it was his Sharingan's doing, many faces flashed in his mind, but only a few made him almost shed a tear at the death's door. Urkiri. Huam. The sound of thousands birds chirping and the murmured technique broke him out of his reminiscing, a look of shock flashed on his eyes for a second, and a certain flashback almost made him chuckle if not for the situation, before he was sent backwards from the clashing of both jutsus. Kakashi tilted his head upwards to see his long-lost student in all his glory, wearing his traditional black armor with a distinctive white fur collar over a simple black suit, numerous plates constructing this armor, reminiscent of the clan's war era. Beneath his shoulder armor, he wore 2 bands on each armor. White bandages wrapped around his ankles followed by black sandals. What made his eyes widen was the sword resting on his waist. He heard bits of rumors about the clash between Orochimaru and Naruto, but, even to him, sounded a bit far-fetched. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Naruto looked over his shoulder to see the broken form of his former teacher, before returning his gaze to the man in front of him. Murderous ice blue eyes met black eyes, the latter having an emotion of disbelief crossing his face. Sorry, I'm late. Jiraiya, who quickly composed himself, smirked at the prospect of getting a bonus out of this mission. You finally came out of hiding, brat. It's time to come back home. Naruto ignored Jiraiya, though, his eyes darkened a bit before looking over his shoulder again. Go help the rest. I'll take care of him. The commanding tone of his voice sent chills down their bodies. Kakashi only replied with a nod before vanishing towards his team's location. Naruto, who had his eyes on Jiraiya again, pointed a single finger towards him, lightning sparks materialized on the tip of his indicator. Prepare yourself, Raiden. By Akurai. Zwap. A single lightning current shoot out of his fingertip, it missed Jiraiya's face for a few centimeters before it completely pierced scorched trees behind the man who had his eyes widened in shock. Too fast. I didn't even see it and the power it held would undoubtedly kill me. This time it will be different. Jiraiya's eyes would have popped out of shock as he heard the voice behind his ears, if not for a single overpowered kick on his back that sent him many meters forward. The Sannin used the momentum and flipped to balance his body to land correctly on the ground. He locked eyes with his pupil Sun, trying to beepize what was happening. Pure speed, pure strength. What the hell? His chest bulged as he went through some hand seals before he let loose a massive stream of flames from his mouth. He had to gain some time to come up with a plan. This Naruto was different from the one he knew. This one wasn't brash or the loudmouth he came to know. He held the eyes of whom has seen death before his very eyes. The eyes of a true shinobi. The very same eyes of the only man he has always feared. Sanshmuo no Hansm. Payton. Correctin. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the technique, his mind instantly clicked on what this traitor was trying to do. But he wouldn't give none of that, instead, he was grateful that he could finally try it in a real battle. His hands formed a single hand seal while inhaling a good amount of air, the massive accumulated amount of chakra was not missed by Jiraiya. Naruto opened his mouth, breathing a huge gust of wind, a tornado immediately took shape before it clashed with the stream of fire. The look of surprise and fear crossed Jiraiya's face as the tornado actually sent the fire stream backwards with a double amount of power, heat and speed. In contrast, Naruto was amused and marveled at the technique he developed. Payton. Tsumugi Itachi, Typhoon Release. Tornado Drop. Jiraiya immediately jumped out of the way, cursing his raging emotions, but the look of fear that wasn't lost on his face turned even more prominent as he saw Naruto moving his right hand towards him, and not a second later, the tornado followed the physical and untold command without any restraints. He's controlling it. The Sannin went through a few hand seals, pushing a bit more chakra than the necessary before slamming his palms on the ground. A tall and thick wall of earth emerged from the ground, right in front of him. There was a booming sound as the ruthless typhoon clashed against the wall. Jiraiya couldn't believe at the amount of chakra he wasted, so the wall wouldn't collapse like it was nothing. Oten. Dorikeki. He missed his enemy's smirk and the sound of clapping hands, fingers intertwined. Fool. Mokuton. Yanagi, wood release. Tree columns. Wood beams erupted from the ground, reaching high into the sky. Not a second later it sprouted and turned back down towards Jiraiya, who had his vision blocked by the wall. Jiraiya widened his eyes as he finally took notice of the 100 beams coming from his blind spot. He cursed himself as he realized his enemy's plan, and for underestimating the brat who he had, up until now, see him as nothing but a nuisance and the loudmouth from the time they met. It's time to get serious. The clone materialized on his side, both already going through some hand seals, their chest noticeable bulged as the wood came close to him. Age Bunshin no Jutsu Kaiten. Inmaku Repk, fire release. Flame screen gale. An huge flaming tornado came out of their mouths, it clashed against the wood beams, and it didn't take too much time before it burned everything on its way. The sheer heat of that technique was felt by Naruto, who stopped his own jutsu after seeing that was useless trying to overcome those flames. It seems someone has been creating new techniques as well, not bad. The grin, no, a maniacal grin was now splitting his face. His blood was starting to pump at the chance of a good battle as he saw, although with some surprise, Jiraiya's pose, his hands glowing and some features of his face already changing. Ooh. It seems he can still use that mode even after the summons break up the contract with him. Naruto could already feel the pressure in the atmosphere changing, foreign chakra sipping and flowing through Jiraiya's chakra coils. Red lines and toad features now more prominent and visible on his face. Brat, the playtime is over. I'll teach you a bit of humility, and just then I'll bring you back. Naruto couldn't hide his glee anymore. He made a single hand seal, and with a grunt, an invisible force sent the dust and everything around him away. The pressure around the area was almost unbearable as Naruto's chakra spiked dramatically and his muscles tensed. Hi. Seals all over his body blinked a few times, which didn't go unnoticed by Jiraiya, who had now his eyes narrowed before it disappeared. He was wearing seals. And if what I saw was indeed correct, there was weight seals as well as chakra suppressions in the mist. His now enhanced sensory ability took a glimpse of Naruto's chakra, and instantly his body shivered involuntarily at the amount he could feel. Nevertheless, he raised an eyebrow as 4 wood clones materialized out of the original body before vanishing towards a specific location. He could sense the 4 of them were standing in a square formation, and before he knew it, a large barrier erupted around them. The red color of it made him nod approvingly as he was considered by many, in Konoha, a seal master, and even him wasn't able to use such high level of Kakashi Kenjutsu. Needless to say, he was astounded that Naruto was able not just for using Kenjutsu, but that he could use at such level with just clones. Shisekimjin. He was broken out of his awe as he heard his opponent speak. Hope you can follow my steps. Jiraiya's eyes widened at the speed, his body shifted to the side almost involuntarily, his Senendo boosted his reaction and senses to the limit, but he was impressed nevertheless. He brought his arm up as Naruto thrust his fist on Jiraiya's direction, and the latter had to grunt at the strength behind it. But not a second later, his arms were a blur as he was forced on defensive as a series of punches and kicks tried to overcome his guard. Dynamiku Akashin. Jiraiya knew if he didn't break the rhythm of his actions, he would be overwhelmed. His pure strength was leaving his arms numb. As he avoided another fist, he stomped the ground with such force that it cracked all around him. It made Naruto lose his balance, giving Jiraiya the opportunity he was waiting for, as he needed Senjutsu and Kaiten chakra on his lungs. His mouth cavity already filled with oil. Jiminwari. Earth splitter. Jiraiya let loose the oil and at the same time it ignited, creating a massive flame point-blank range at Naruto, who had his eyes widened for a second at the fast and well-executed techniques. Kaiten. Dienden. Naruto didn't hesitate and immediately brought his arms in front of him, his fingers a blur of movement as he literally painted many seals with the use of his chakra on thin air in less than a second. Just as the huge flame was about to engulf him, chakra-like vapor covered the flames, although with some strain, but effectively making it disappear as a blue kanji that red fire suppression glowed in front of Naruto's hands. Jiraiya had his eyes widened at the ability he only heard tales of, the special ability of Mito Uzumaki. Come in. What? Jiraiya's face was one of disbelief. Never in a million years he thought he would see such ability. His pride as a seal master didn't believe he just saw this brat use it with such finesse, as if it was a walk in the park. Pathetic. Letting your guard down for even a second while dancing in. Kai. A still glowing blue kanji let loose the flames it just sealed as Naruto formed a single hand seal, his cheeks bulging noticeably. Dawn. Kami Arashi. Jiraiya, who was a few meters away after witnessing such prowess with Genjutsu, had his jaws on the ground. The sheer size of the flaming vortex that would make even Madara proud was something he wasn't expecting. Well, he wasn't expecting Naruto using his own jutsu against him. He never knew Kamen could be used like that, but he guessed it was because he needed a scroll, and Naruto didn't. Jiraiya steeled his gaze. He went through many hand seals, needing a good chunk of his senjutsu chakra to his lunge before expelling a large amount of water from his mouth. It took shape of a dragon instantly as it roared to the skies before it lunged towards the vortex. Suiton. Sush Gorgon. Another booming sound as both techniques clashed against each other before a large amount of steam emerged from the clashing, engulfing the whole area inside the barrier in a thick mist. It's over. Naruto used the insane amount of molecules around the area to cloak himself. The water vapor bended the light around him, erasing his presence, even to his opponent's enhanced sensories. Ujin Maisai, vapor cloak. On the other side, Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at the sudden disappearance of the chakra signature. Maybe the brat had used this chance to escape, he mused to himself, but dismissed that thought in a second as he still could see bits of the red color that was the barrier still standing. He was broken out of his thoughts as multiple slashes, in an interval of a millisecond, met his body and then. Pain. Kusanagi no Ken. Satsuna Doku. The voice behind him and the murmured technique left his eyes widened in shock, despite the pain that he was feeling. Shit, Kusanagi is filled with poison. And just as finished that train of thoughts, his body turned numb, poison started to flow through the multiple cuts his body suffered in the previous technique. If it wasn't for his enhanced boost and durability that the sage move gave him, he would be undoubtedly dead. He took notice of the barrier dispersing itself as the mist followed. Not a second later, he gazed over the figure still maintaining a safe distance, in front of him. He smirked, as he wasn't a Sannin for nothing. He used his remaining strength, needing chakra on his right palm, before slamming it on a scroll that he had borrowed from the toads. Even though it was a one-time use, he knew it was the right time. A plume of smoke engulfed his body to reappear at the location he had chosen, in case he had to use it, not before snarling at the brat for giving him such a beating and humiliation. This is not over, remember that Jayaku Kuchius. Jiraiya missed the smirk that came over Naruto's features. He didn't even thought for a second why he had missed the chance to finish him off and just chalked it up to him being beepy, but that was all well. Naruto knew that the former Gama Sennin had a few aces upon his sleeve, at least to escape. He was a renowned man for spying and escaping, so it was of no surprise that Naruto saw him use a scroll that he had immediately identified as a reversal technique from the seals visible to the naked eye. He had telepathic ordered one of the wood clones that was holding the barrier to turn itself into a seed and plant itself on Jiraiya. He would use this to make contact with the remaining people inside of the village. At first he had his mind focused on killing the nuisance that was Jiraiya, but then he remembered that he couldn't make direct contact with the persons he cared about that were still residing in Konoha. So, although he didn't hold back in beating the pervert, he still wanted for the Sannin to escape without any suspicions. The Smshinki, signal seeds, that was mainly used for tracking his enemies, would be the key to get everyone out of that hellhole. His personal plan was finally starting. Naruto's sensors detected the group he had saved a few kilometers away. They had already finished their battle a few minutes ago. He knew the Kakashi, even if exhausted, would be too much for the squad that had followed them. He took a few deep breaths as his chakra started to replenish on his own before heading towards where he felt them resting. He had a faraway look while running. The letter has probably reached them by now. It's time for the wake-up call, and for the world to know Uzushio's return is not just some laughable rumor. Naruto didn't even notice the woefully quiet beast inside of him. Kikbi, who has been watching everything playing, could only sigh at the state of the world. He knew what was coming, and the battles ahead of his host wouldn't be any less dangerous where every single second mattered. The news of a rising village that had already his history written in the shinobi books for their fame and prowess over many shinobi arts was a dangerous topic for the high-class ninjas all over the world. There was no doubt that many people would try to explore and use it for their own goals and greed, not to say there was still Akatsuki lurking around. Their mission of gathering the GODYRICKZ was something that bothered him greatly. There was only one goal and result he could think of if they were sealing all of his kin into one object, and that was something that even he, the Kikbi, feared if they succeeded. I guess it's time, Hagoromo Jiji, he's ready. Kumogakure no Sato. Raikage's office. In the Raikage's office, the tall and muscled man gazed over the letter for what seems to be the 100th time, reading every detail of it. This was huge, he didn't know that they were already so far up ahead. He would have thought it would take a few years for this to happen. He had already discussed the topic of the letter with his now trusty council, and everyone had agreed to what was being proposed in the scroll. I had no doubts that if the old council hadn't been dealt with after the revelation of some secret information when Uzumaki destruction that even he didn't know about and the mission given to Ujito recently, there would be a pandemonium, but at least, they were all in hell. The greedy bastards were easily on par with Konoha. The bulky man was very surprised when, at the time of Naruto's departure, Uzumaki Jensi had proposed him a partnership between Kumogakure and Uzumaki. He had asked the million Ryos question. Why? Although Jensi showed the hatred he felt towards all the great nations except for Suna, he had explained him that during the years he lived nearby Kumogakure that he started to lose the grudge he had against them. After discovering the council's plan behind the weak-willed but powerhouse nickname Raikage, he knew it was a matter of time before he let loose the pure hatred towards Kumo. During the many years after his disappearance he had watched from afar how Kumo grew up from a greedy village to a humble and respectful one. The Jinchuriki's treatment helped in the matter, albeit the Nibi's host was only after some time, and even then, some of the old generation hated her with passion. And now, the scroll he held in his hands, his answer, no, Kaminari no Kuni and Kumogakure's answer, would mark a very important and historic moment in the elemental nations. His eyes landed on the title as he read it again. Proposition for Alliance. Rebork Shanzuham, the revolutioners. Whoever named it has a bad taste. There no Kuni. The letter with the same content was being read by none other than Koyuki Kazuhana. Her eyes were widened in disbelief as a hopeful look came over them as she read the name who signed the letter. Uzumaki Jensi, Yondai Mei Yuzukage. But a single note under it left her paralyzed emotionally, no words came out of her mouth. P.S. The Hara no Kuni's hero has been dying to talk with a certain princess. After what seemed to be hours just standing there trying to process the words she just read, a blush crept on her face at the idea of finally being with a man that gave her hope again and helped her in getting her country back. Nami no Kuni. The sound of a bottle breaking on the floor could be heard inside a modest house, footsteps of someone running towards the man who let the bottle fall could be heard, followed by a female concerned voice. Father? What happened? Their father, Tazuna, was pale as if he just saw a ghost. She took notice of the letter that was on the table and immediately read it in a span of a minute. And just as she ended reading it, she too was left in shock, specifically at the notes written in the end. P.S. Nami's hero hopes to meet you again in the near future as he's our ambassador. He said that he missed a drunk geezer, a beautiful woman, and wants to see how much the kid had grown over the years, whatever that meant. Needless to say, there was many curses about damn brats and a blushing mess that was Tsunami after reading the beautiful woman part. Though, there was one thing that both were thinking in common. He's back. The former, who had heard tales of Uzumaki from his father and how Nami was protected by the same village when they were still standing, couldn't help but shed a tear as a particular memory, or more specifically, a dream of his father hit him. I hope one day that Uzumaki returns to his former glory. We were like brother and sister back then. It's really sad that a village full of energy got destroyed, but I know that one day they will be back. And it will be up to you to support them when the time comes. Make me proud, son. Dad, it's finally happening. Sunagakure no Sado. Izikage's office. Gaara had a small smile on his lips as he read the contents of the scroll. His brother and sister, Kankuro and Tamari, were on his side reading it over his shoulder. Both with shocked and surprised looks, but not Gaara. Oh no. He knew this was coming, well, not Uzumaki in particular. A surprising move that not even he could have guessed in a million years, now that he knew. Uzumaki Naruto, you never cease to amaze me. Tamari, get me the faster bird messenger we have available at the moment. The monotone voice of her brother broke Tamari out of her thoughts, she could only nod in agreement before she vanished from the office. Kankuro, who was still at Gaara's side, couldn't help but open his mouth to add his cent. Man, that kid has style. In the end of the letter, both of them read out loud the note written by Uzumaki Jensi. P.S. Hope with this alliance we can finally reunite the Nine with his longtime friend and kin, one, and his brother and sister again. Indeed, he has. 2 days later. Uzumaki no Sado. In the top of the Uzukage's tower stood the same Uzumaki Jensi gazing over his people. Everyone was standing proud and looking up to their Kage, who had reunited them once again all those years ago. The fire in their hearts now burned brightly once again, after it had been extinguished long time ago. The Uzumaki had been waiting for his apprentice to arrive, but it seemed that he would miss the show. Naruto had told him to take the announcement even if he wasn't present, but as one of his Chunin gave him the signal to start, in the corner of his purple eyes, on top of a building, there he stood, arms crossed over his chest with an impassive face, though. You couldn't miss the small smile on his lips and the proud look that he was trying but failing to hide, Uzumaki Naruto. Behind him stood what he could now deduce, Hot Aki Kakashi, Yuhi Kurenai, Inuzuka Hana and Kato Shizune. It seems his mission was a success. He broke the eye's contact with Naruto as he needed chakra into his lungs before a booming voice was heard all over the village. As of now, we, Uzumaki, after so many hardships and sacrifices, is finally and officially back. Let's show the world why they should have confirmed that we were indeed dead, let's give them hell. In unison, every single human that was present noticed the emotions running through the speech, their blood pumped and the adrenaline coursing through their veins, made everyone shout as the power of those thousands voices shook the entire village. The former Konoha nins were left in shock at the scene in front of them, and neither of them missed Naruto's fist shaking in what they could tell. Excitement. Uzushio, hooray. Silence filled the room. Both civilian and shinobi sides were thinking about the confirmation of some inconceivable rumors they have been hearing for a while. They didn't think it was worth the trouble as, by now, everyone knew about the fate of Uzumaki during the Deniji Ninkai Taisen, Second Shinobi World War. What many didn't know was that Konoha had a big hand, in their destruction. Tsunade, who portrayed a stoic face during Dansum's explanation, was the first to address the council. The civilian side were, by now, used to the new Tsunade. A veteran kunoichi who, since long, had snapped and didn't care about anyone's opinion, everything she said was an order and whoever went against it was executed plain and simple. The shinobi side, however, was a different matter. Each clan head had their own thoughts, some saw it as the logical way to guide Konoha to a higher level, like Shibuya Burami. Others could see underneath the underneath and, somehow, they knew their Kage was being manipulated by someone. Nara Shikaku and his son had many sleepless nights trying to solve this enigma, but it was just frustrating that they didn't have all the pieces on the board to solve it. But their suspicions were towards the shinobi no Yami. The fact that Tsunade had his root reinstated was the key factor to their suspicions. It's been almost 2 weeks since Kakashi, Kurenai, Hana and Shizune went on a mission and were yet to arrive. This was troubling, and Tsume, who was known for her impatience, had a limit, but still, they had to give it to her for keeping a leveled head. Though, Shikaku, more than Shikamaru, thought there was more into it. The Nara head had this feeling she was hiding something. But it was just too troublesome to ask. And so, I'm sending a team to travel to Uzumaki and open negotiations for an alliance with them. They were our cousins before their destruction, and I hope we can have our long-lost allies back and help each other in this time of need. Shikaku narrowed his eyes hearing this bit of information. He wasn't a fool, his mind had already put some pieces together and knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Why, you ask? Because they didn't ask their so-called cousins to help them rebuild the village. Which got him into thinking, why haven't they or whoever was leading their construction asked for Konoha's help in the matter? The Uzumakis were a bunch of goofballs, they have always put their family first, and their alliance, due to the marriage between Senju Hashirama and Uzumaki Mido, was something that they held in high regards. Maybe it was because Konoha had went against their own views and was now a shell of her former self. Or it could be because they were tied in financial terms following the loss of the majority of their allies just a month later after the banishment of. At that moment, Shikaku's eyes widened in shock. Naruto Uzumaki. The Uzumaki clan were insanely loyal to their respective village, but that immediately came into an halt when it came to their own family and ideology. One of their own being banished by their supposed allies or cousins would be practically treason or betrayal, and one thing that they didn't stand was being betrayed. One would want an Uzumaki as their ally, but if someone went against their views it would be catastrophic and to add more fuel to the fire. They had banished the son of the heiress, their rightful heir. It didn't take long for Shikaku to put everything together. This wasn't a trip for a supposed alliance, this was a trap. Whoever was working behind the scenes wanted something from Uzumaki. Something they weren't able to get when they were allies. Something that Uzushio had probably refused to give. And when someone doesn't get what they want, I'll discuss with the elders what team will be traveling and negotiate with them. You're dismissed. Shikaku's body was frozen in place for a few seconds as the whole council bar the Hokage and the elders stood up to leave the chambers. His mind went blank as realization hit him like a Nikiden Sensha, point-blank range, from his teammate, Akamichi Chimza. In his subconscious, Achibi Shikaku grunted checkmate. Konoha betrayed Uzushio. The Togakure no Sado. Underground. Since the battle between him and the Kikbi's brat, Orochimaru spent most of the time cursing the Jinchuriki for whatever he was worth. Curse you blonde brat. It wasn't enough that Minato brat had everything I could only wish for, and now his stupid son is following his steps and more. Oh, here we go again. The Uzumaki brat had showed a level of potential he has never seen in his whole life. It dwarfed Sasuke's. Even if his little Uchiha had a good amount of raw talent due to his blood, it paled in comparison. Though, a part of him still believed Sasuke was stronger than Naruto. The only thing that irked him was the fact that Kabuto and the former Konoha's genin had heard his runts when he arrived in a condition similar to that when Hansm had beat him and his teammates like a rag doll. It infuriated him. More so when the damn Uchiha had made beepy remarks saying that it was impossible for the so-called dope to be that strong, that the Sannin was weaker than he thought, and that he would, eventually, go after the blonde to serve his life's purpose. Give him the power that only was he worth of. The Manjukum Sharingan. The fool didn't even acknowledge the fact that Naruto possessed the famous Mokuton Kekkei Genkai, and again, they think it's a bloodline, or that he acquired skills beyond belief in a span of 3 years, like his Suiton, Genjutsu and if he was correct, a raw and unseen talent for the Raiten affinity. Thinking a bit about Sasuke's training, he frowned. The fool was too arrogant for his own good, and the worst thing was that the Sannin didn't think he had the power to back it up. At the moment, Sasuke was only able to give him a decent challenge, and he wasn't even used to the new body he had transferred to. The news Kabuto brought him about Sunagakure was something he didn't expect it as well. He mused to himself about the possibility to acquire their knowledge on Genjutsu and Kinjutsu, that would be interesting. He could use those two to get inside, and if his hunch about the Kickbee's brat whereabouts were right, maybe he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Kabuto, bring me the sound for Karen, Sasuke and Kimimaro. Another and yes, Kimimaro is alive. I hope many of you like him because he will be someone that will have a role in this story. It's why they killed him off so soon, in the canon, thus ending Kagaya's clan line. Orochimaru didn't even see if his right-hand man had acknowledged his order, his mind was already racing through plans to get some of the precious, dangerous and powerful Uzumaki's hijutsus. Karen and Taiyuya, unbeknownst to them, they had Uzumaki's blood running in their veins. Karen more than the Genjutsu specialist but the latter's purpose, along with the rest of the Sound 4, was only to protect the medic redhead to access their vaults, though, he wouldn't tell her why it had to be specifically her. Oh no. The Sannin didn't expect Karen or the others to betray him, but it was better to be safe than sorry. The plan was simple but effective. They wouldn't be suspicious about the sudden appearance of 2 Uzumakas. Both girls would explain that they heard the recent news of their home being rebuilt to its full glory again and that they didn't waste any time in coming back to their family. They wouldn't suspect a thing due to their family's foolish ideology. Being an extremely good censor, Karen would be able to fool the praying eyes that would be watching them in the shadows in case they suspected anything, and as soon as they lost them, she would reverse summon the rest of the Sound 4, Kimimaro and Sasuke. While they hide in the shadows, Taiyuya would look out for their knowledge and any type of jutsus, while Karen would, hopefully, locate Naruto for Sasuke and Kimimaro to take him down and retrieve his body for experiment. Due to the village being recently formed, the Uzukage, who was yet to reveal himself, was most likely busy with all the paperwork that comes with ascension of any village. He, himself, had cursed those damn documents that seemed to randomly and somehow appear on his office located in the underground. Simple, but effective. The Wagakure no Sado. Tsuchikage's office. From Tenban no Noki, Sande Ami Tsuchikage was widely known for being a stubborn old man. That, and his Kekei Jinten and for hating Daime Hokage with all his might. Though, he wasn't a man known for showing any, not even the slightest, amount of fear. That's why, at that moment, his granddaughter Kurituchi and his personal bodyguard Akatsuki were slightly apprehended seeing the rare show of emotions, specifically, the pale expression of their Kages. This can't be. Known for her impatience and beepy remarks, Kuritsuchi stomped the floor with her foot, gazing over the old fool. What's up Oji-san? You finally snapping? Akatsuki was about to scold at Tsuchikage's granddaughter, even if he too was curious about what could get the old man so riled up, though he had a vague idea, but before he could give her a warning, the Iwagakure's leader spoke, everyone could detect the fear in his voice from miles away. We call for an emergency council meeting right this instant. I don't care what they're doing, if they aren't in our chambers in 30 minutes, I'll make all of them disappear in the next second. Go. Akatsuki immediately nodded as his body was reduced to dust the moment his leader finished relaying the orders. Kuritsuchi was about to make another reply, but the hard gaze her grandfather gave her stopped whatever she was going to say. It actually scared her seeing the old man like that. She just exited the room and would wait for an explanation later on. In the office, however, Inoki had his old mind racing through the significance of this news. It was a dangerous topic. He was sure that the small portion of the army that survived Uzushio's destruction reported no Uzumakas alive. Though, later on, everyone heard about Uzumaki Kushina, who became a renowned Kenjutsu and Kenjutsu user all over the world, arguably the strongest Kunoichi to ever set a foot on the elemental nations. So, it could be possible that another Uzumaki had survived, but who? Someone who would be able to not just rebuild it, but succeed in keeping it in secret from everyone. This was troubling. The only possible way was to renovate the barriers all around the island to keep everyone away from trying to surpass the strong whirlpools and find the vault. During its destruction, no one was able to enter the supposed Uzukage's tower, and many villages had tried but failed bypass the seals when suddenly after some years, the whirlpools that surrounded the island became more wild, and by then, everyone thought that its former barriers or some type of failsafe just reactivated, thus they stopped trying to acquire their knowledge. But it seems it was the workman Uzumaki who actually survived the invasion. And if that was indeed true, the man or woman who was leading the village probably held a massive grudge all over the nations. Though, it came as a surprise when he read reports about the alliance with Kumogakure as they too participated in their demise, which doubled the amount of threat they were. Maybe that fool old warhawk could provide the code to break the seals again, what to do. Sunagakure no Sato. Random training grounds. Two figures were standing in the clearing, both bepising one another. The boy on the left has spiky blonde hair, some red streaks were visible on it, two bangs framing either side of his face. He was wearing his traditional black armor with a distinctive white fur collar over a simple black suit, numerous plates constructing this armor, reminiscent of the clan's war era. Beneath his shoulder armor, he wore two bands on each armor. White bandages wrapped around his ankles followed by black sandals. Kusanagi safely secured on the right side of his waist. On his left side, a mask was firmly stuck there. He had an impassive face while looking towards the man in front of him. Said man has spiky silver hair, a mask covering everything from below his nose. He was wearing a dark red flak jacket, dark blue pants, and a long-sleeve shirt. Fingerless gloves with metal plates on the backhand. His hide with the insignia of Sunagakure embedded on it, normally covering his left eye, was now tilted upwards showing his implanted three-tomoed Sharingan. He had a lazy expression on his face, though the younger boy could easily tell how his muscles were tense. Both were wearing a piece of fabric in common, though, in different colors, a black armband on Kakashi's and dark red on Naruto's left bicep. Naruto's had a kanji that read Hydra, visible to the naked eye, the other had a kanji for Shugasha. The ranking system implemented by the current Uzukage, Uzumaki Jensi, he used the knowledge he had over mythological beings or sea monsters and named them accordingly. The Kuma no Kujira, Devil Whale Unit. The group that specializes on trap making. The Explosion Corps. Her Kentani, Kraken Unit, the Barrier Unit. This group is responsible for the safekeeping of their village. A person of this unit, through the many uses the barrier has, will check out whoever bypasses the seals protecting the island from his intentions to his or her chakra and then see if it matches with any of their villagers. This process is done unknowingly as soon as a person crosses any of the hidden seals all over the ocean surrounding Uzushio. Naruto Tani, Sea Nymphs Unit. The Seduction Corps. Jin Tani, Shark Unit. The Medical Corps. Sakura Tani, Sila Unit. The Assault Unit. Aide Nahibi, Midgard Serpent Unit. The Tracker Unit. Umibamzu Tani, Sea Priests Unit. Intelligence and Torture Corps. Uzugo no Shugasha, 5 Whirlpool Guardians. Known to house the 5 strongest shinobis of the village that only answered to the Uzukage or their commander. And a few others. There was no Chiknin or Joknin rank. As soon as a genin gets promoted, said person goes through a test to see which area he or she specializes. Inside those respective units, there are several other ranks ranging from novice to captain. Each person that gets to join a specific corps are given 1 year to adapt, train and learn from the seniors, and as soon as that year ends, he or she is tested on his or her specialization, and if failed, they will be demoted to the reserves. Said reserves will only be called in case a squad is missing a person, meanwhile that person will be given jobs such as guard the gates, patrolling inside the village, etc. But this system, the mortality rate was very low. It was easy to organize a squad in case of need. The fact that it requires a certain level of skill to pass the test after a year, it made everyone relieved that they could count on whoever they were to be partnered with. All of those factions answered to the Uzukage and to their commander. The Hydra. Whoever gets into Hydra position was or would be, to many, the strongest shinobi in the village. Some said that whoever gets to the Hydra position will most likely be the successor to the current Uzukage. Said person wears the distinctive dark red armband and a mask which had a design of multi-headed dragon-like beast. It was the blonde-haired who finally broke the silence that had extended for a few minutes. Though, the flat tone almost sent a shiver to Kakashi's spine. We didn't have much time to talk since I retrieved you all, and with everything going on it was literally impossible. Guess it was to be expected that you would join the 5 Guardians of Yuzu though. I'm surprised you actually accepted Jensai-sensei's offer to join the group since they are a very busy group. Kakashi gave his former student an eye smile. Honestly, even he was surprised with himself when he accepted the proposition without any hesitation, but after a while, he shook it off to wanting to help his little cute student's future goals. He spoke his thoughts. I guess so. I've been training pretty hard myself during the last few years. But. Here, an Incan summoner grabbed his precious orange book out of his kunai pouch as another eye smile appeared on his face, a few giggles instantly followed his next statement. Old habits die hard. Naruto sweat dropped at the familiar antics. Though, the next second his gaze hardened and the way he said the next few words actually sent a few chills down Kakashi's spine this time. Hope you're ready for wasting my time all those years ago. Mokuton Naruto clapped his hands in a praying-like motion. Kakashi was immediately put on guard as the pressure in the atmosphere became suddenly too heavy. He still couldn't believe that his sensei's son had improved this much in just few years. Jukai Mutant. The ground beneath them trembled and without any warnings thousands of massive tree trunks exploded from it. The sheer number and density of the trees made Kakashi sweat drop. Mama, isn't that a bit too much for a simple spar? Omegakure no Sado. Tower. Konan is a woman that could easily read a person's emotions through their body language, she had mastered that art. At the moment, she was hearing the real leader of the Akatsuki reporting his findings, but it was the news of the return of Sunagakure that made the beautiful Aim no Tenshi narrow her eyes at the death body of her former teammate and friend, Yahiko. The orange-haired was slowly moving towards somewhere while hearing what Toby found, and as soon as the word Sunagakure left his mouth, his body froze. It wasn't a natural body's reaction as all 6 paths bodies didn't show any type of emotions since they were already dead. It was the fact that the real body, Nagato, who was hiding at the top of the highest building in Aim, stopped giving any type of commands. It was only for a second and he doubted the so-called Uchiha Madara saw it since he had his eye somewhere else, but his blue-haired long-time friend noticed. They were snapped out of their thoughts as the founder of the Uchiha clan spoke. It's going to be a pain in the ass. I guess it's time to show up myself since Asori died a few months ago. We are way behind the schedule, by this time we should already have the first 2 GODYRICKZ sealed. We only succeeded in sealing the Ichibi. Send Dodara along with myself to capture Sanbi. Zetsu reported that it's about to reform somewhere between Yuzu and Mizu no Kuni. It was Nagato's companion who immediately replied. What about Uzushio? Yuzu no Kuni is part of their territory. Don't worry about them, the other nations except Kumogakure will be making them busy enough for us to travel through their borders without worry. Pain was quiet the whole time while hearing the man plotting against Sanbi and the remaining GODYRICKZ. Right now he had his mind on the newly reformed village. It was an expected reaction since he, too, was in Uzumaki. During the time Yahiko was alive, one of his dreams, he had vowed to himself, was to rebuild his ancestors' home, though, that dream went downhill or was basically forgotten when the accident where he killed his best friend happened. He had to think about this before making any rash decisions. Hi Madara. I'll give the instructions in the next Akatsuki's meeting. Madara looked over the orange-haired body for a few seconds before grunting Uchiha-like. With a joyful voice, he waved his hand to his comrades as the air around him distorted and slowly engulfed his body. Toby, will see you next time. Bye-bye. Sunagakure no Sado. Training grounds. Inside of a newly formed forest you could hear metal clashing on metal. 2 blurs once again met on top of one of the thousands branches clashing their respective swords. Kakashi's was smaller but not less dangerous, the Hakamchakura TM. The white blur clashed against the black blur of the Kaminakari. Enkma Nagashi, lightning stream. Kakashi flinched as his body was engulfed in a stream of electricity unleashed from his opponent's Nadachi. He would be badly injured if it wasn't for his main affinity being Raiden. Naruto used his unoccupied left hand to deliver a palm thrust on his former sensei's chest that sent him flying back. He released a few breaths before gazing over the torn and bloody form of the White Fang son. He immediately tensed as Kakashi's hand was engulfed in lightning before he launched it in the form of a hound. The Uzumaki member raised an eyebrow at the impressive speed and the cord of lightning that connected the hound to Kakashi's hand. Oh? It seems he's able to control it, so I can't dodge. Then. Raiden. Rage Tsuga, lightning release. Lightning beast tracking Fang. It howled to the skies as it got closer to Naruto, who by now had gathered a good chunk of his chakra into his left hand. A small whirlwind-like ball immediately took shape before he too lunged it forward in even higher speeds. Ton. Race in K's Mary, wind release. Spiraling wind ball. The effects were instantaneous. As soon as the whirlwind ball met the lightning beast, it completely annihilated the hound before it kept going towards Kakashi, who had his Sharingan eye widened in shock. Impossible, I can't dodge it. His Sharingan was spinning wildly and soon started to take a shape into a new form or pattern. Hamui. Naruto's ice blue eyes widened in shock as the space air around his technique distorted and soon sucked his jutsu to God knows where. He took notice of the new pattern of the former Konoha's jounin. Just like during Gaara's rescue, so that's the power of the Mangekyou Sharingan. Truly frightening. Naruto noticed his former sensei breathing became very heavy and immediately came to the conclusion that since he hadn't Uchiha's blood running through him, it must take a huge toll on his reserves. He idly noticed the similarities of this technique over the one that called himself Uchiha Madara used. Maybe it was a technique that comes with the Mangekyou. Maybe he could ask some Uchiha. Naruto shook his head. There were no Uchihas alive, well, no power-hungry Uchihas at least. The blonde-haired watched as Kakashi ate a chakra and blood pill and had to grimace as when their battle was over, his senior would probably resting for a whole week thanks to the secondary effects of eating those pills. Well, he deserves it. Sunagakure no Sado. The Zikage's office. Gaara released a sigh of frustration. Since his rescue, the council has been nagging him over the alliance with Konohagakure. They were scared that two mans were able to penetrate their defenses and kidnap the Kazekage, and so, they were demanding for an alliance, at least, with one of the 5 great nations. They regretted the fact that they had strained the peace treaty they had signed after the Chunin exam's invasion because of a single boy, Uzumaki Naruto, and now, in their opinion, were paying the price. It was understandable, in Gaara's opinion, but the fact that they wanted the so-called almighty Konoha as an ally left him a bad taste in his mouth. After he refused and that there were another options such as the new Kurigakure or this new reformed Uzashigakure, the problem with the latter was that it wasn't considered one of the 5. Many of the councillors started to think twice when they voted on the former Ichibi's Jinchuriki to be the Gon Daimei Kazekage. Needless to say, there was a division between those who wanted a new Kage and the minority part that wanted to still serve under and had their beliefs on the current Kazekage. Gaara and Temari, the latter being one of his bodyguards or assistants, were slightly anxious as they were still at young age, and the idea of Sunagakure, their home, turn into a bloodbath scenario shook them to the very core. What they didn't know was that thought was about to turn into a reality as 2 figures, in the western part of Sunagakure, gazed over their army. In the shadows stood a few squads with a blank mask with a kanji for no engraved on it. It's time to get our beloved village, once again, on par with the other nations. We will not stand for being considered the weakest of the 5 anymore. We will make our ancestors proud today. The figure, standing on side of the man who just made the motivational speech, gazed over the cheering crowd before locking eyes with the man once again. Did someone write out that speech for you? No one takes you to be that kind of person, Baki-sensei. The now revealed Baki, Sunagakure's jounin, looked over the proud form of his student on his side before letting a small smirk grace his lips as he replied. A ninja must see through deception, am I right, Kankurm? The older brother of the current Kazekage crossed his arms while letting out a grunt as he turned his eyes, once again, to their army. I guess so. Act 2. Uzashigakure no Sado. Their strength overall has improved, not bad. Kakashi smiled at the appraise his now superior gave him before letting the unconsciousness claim him. Naruto huffed in boredom. He kinda expected for his former sensei to give him more of a challenge. He was actually surprised that he was able to keep going for that long before finally fainting because of chakra and physical exhaustion. Sending a clone to pick up the former jounin and carry him to the hospital, he decided to take a trip around the village since he had nothing else to do. The teenager could never stop himself to be marveled every time his eyes landed on the eccentric buildings and the cheerful population of Uzashigakure. It was many times better than the likes of Konoha for sure. While walking around the village, childs and teens to grown-ups to retired shinobis or civilians alike bowed to him. His armband around his left bicep stood proudly to the display of the population. Though, you could see from the many eyes that landed on his figure that they weren't bowing for fear but awe, respect and mainly, proud that they were being protected by one of their own. Sometimes many childrens grew up a backbone and asked for an autograph, which Naruto gladly accepted while giving a few advices to the hopefuls to be shinobis. They expressed their gratitude and dreamed to, one day, be strong and cool like him. Naruto couldn't help himself but smile at the future prospects and being their role model. He made sure to always warn them that the shinobi world wasn't a playground and that it was much darker than it seems. But, if they had anyone worthy to protect, they would be, undoubtedly, stronger and perhaps, one day, stronger than him. Although, even if the childs weren't able to read underneath that weird, in their opinion, concept or cryptic words, the adults all around them could only nod in approval and proud that this young man was so protective over their future generation. Naruto suddenly stopped in his tracks as a familiar voice he hasn't heard for a few days already spoke to him. Naruto, it's time. He gave an hesitant unconscious nod before he vanished from the spot he was standing, towards Uzukage's tower. Kurigakure no Sado. Izukage's office. Mei Terumi, the new Gon Daimei Mizukage, stood behind her desk reading the reports and the confirmation of some rumors going around for some time. She had read the documents only to the eye of the Mizukage about the destruction of Sunagakure. Needless to say, she was baffled at the stupidity of the Nidaime Mizukage at that time, though, the part that consisted of her Kage's mind, saw the real reason and the need behind the invasion. Kiri at that specific time didn't exactly have a good military power, compared to, for example, Iwagakure, and there were rumors that Yuzashio would replace Kiri in the foods chain. The gorgeous auburn-haired let out an unladylike grunt. This could be catastrophic if the current leader of Yuzashio knew everything about the invasion. He would probably hold a grudge over her village. Maybe she could send a scroll to ask for a meeting between them and resolve the matter without shedding any blood. She had had enough of it, the civil war ended recently, and the busty woman didn't plan to enter another war so soon. Ow, call the fastest bird we have available if you would. The Byakugan's wielder, not that many knew, looked over his leader trying to decipher why would she need that. Though as soon as he saw a sickly smile grow on her features, he immediately vanished from the office before he could anger her, knowing already what would follow. Thanks to that, he totally missed the Mizukage's smirk. He's learning. Sunagakure no Sado. Sacred location Kami no Yumi, divine seas. Naruto sat in a cross-legged position in the white floor, could he call it floor? All around him was basically and literally white. It was like a void, but instead of black, it was white. It was a weird scenario for the Uzumaki member who stiffened slightly as he felt the sudden presence of his master. Aki. Naruto's eyebrow twitched, getting a smile of amusement out of Jensi. This is a sacred place that our ancestors used to relax and have access to their inner spirit so they could be how would you say be one with them. Everyone has hatred within their hearts, what many don't know is that inner spirit is boosted with those negative emotions. And so, our ancestors created this place, with the help of thousands of seals, to have access, confront and finally become complete. Naruto already knew that after reading the private Yuzu's library, that only a few had access, but he felt that his sensei wanted to show how proud he was of their heritage. Since he had the Kikbi sealed inside of him, his hatred, jealousy and few other negative emotions were transferred to the beast instead of his inner spirit. One could say that instead of having an inner spirit, he had an inner demon. And there will be no Yami Naruto, even if I kinda like the idea, though I'm the opinion of that Naruto should have changed his attitude when they became one. Now that I remember, didn't he proclaim that he would be cooler than his father? Lol, guess what, bitch. As soon as his sensei stopped ranting about the awesomeness of the Uzumakis and how they once sealed the whole ocean, how the hell did it come to that, he didn't know he focused. His eyes closed as he started to inhale and exhale evenly. Mindscape. Over the years, Naruto had changed the scenario from the degrading sewer to a huge forest and an artificial sun washing over the clearing. Naruto opened his dark blue eyes, immediately locking onto the pair of slitted red eyes. He was about to speak, but the humongous fox in front of him cut him off. This is your final test, hope you remember our deal fail, and I'll take over your body though, you don't need to worry as I'll fulfill your goals first before settling down. Pass, and you'll be able to use my chakra on a whole new level. The blonde-haired gazed over his companion since he was born for a few seconds. Stealing his resolve, he took a few steps forward before he finally came to a stop as a paper that had a kanji for seal embedded on it stood proudly attached to a stone wall. That same wall was basically to put a limitation to the space that Kikbi could travel. He had tried to remove or shape it into something like a necklace, but that stupid thing had as its purpose to stop the demon in case it wanted to reach its host. For the first time, Naruto placed his hand over the seal and slowly started to remove said seal. It was only by halfway that suddenly a hand grabbed his wrist, the pressure forced him to let the paper go before he was thrusted backwards in a rude manner. The sound of footsteps approaching met his ears, and he immediately locked eyes with the person that just stopped him from doing whatever he was about to do, wanting to pummel, whoever the person was, to the ground. Blue eyes met dark blue eyes. The former had a scowl on his face, the latter's face soon, too, contorted into a murderous scowl. It seems I'll finally have the opportunity to set you on the right path. Dark blue eyes started to give off sparks of electricity as he heard those words coming out of the mouth of the person that once in the past was his idol. Naruto was about to give his own remark as his body was already trembling in rage, but was cut off. Yondaime. The loud demonic voice shook the whole mindscape, though the blonde-haired adult didn't give it any attention, and a second later he blurred through many hand seals, before slamming a hand on the ground, a large array of seals appeared visible to the naked eye. Inten. Kuchiyus no Jutsu, Yin release. Summoning technique. Kikbi halted in his rage moment as his eyes widened in shock at this new feeling that washed over him, it felt so familiar, it was just like. Oh no, it can't be. A huge plume of smoke engulfed a good chunk of the clearing, Naruto was sent back from the sheer pressure of it before a loud roaring made him look upwards, and soon his eyes widened in shock and fear as in front of him stood. Uruer. Dark burnt orange, almost brown colored, 9 tails swirling dangerously on the back of a huge fox. Slitted red eyes looking down on the wide-eyed Naruto, a menacing grin came over its features as Namikaze Minato, that was on the top of Beast's head, spoke. After this is over, you'll be serving Konoha. After this is all over, you'll be serving Konoha. Those words kept replaying itself in his mind. You'll be serving Konoha. Serving it was a mere whisper, but everyone present was still able to hear it. Wisps of chakra started to leak out of his pores, circulating his form, his face was completed shadowed by his hair. Konoha. The blonde-haired lifted his head, as murderous icy blue eyes gazed over his father, as thick purplish dark blue chakra exploded out of Naruto's body, the ground beneath him instantly cracked under its pressure. The temperature in the mindscape dropped several degrees under the volume of such power. Yondai Mei, even Yin Kikbi, were kinda put off at the amount of pressure on their shoulders. They could feel the amount of anger rolling off of the kid and if the random sparks of electricity here and there that Naruto's body was giving off. He was pissed. As soon as the chakra receded, Naruto clapped his hands, moisture in the air and from the plants in the forest gathered almost immediately in front of him as a massive wave that surpassed a Kikbi's in size materialized before he thrust his arms forward. Suiton. Sujin Hantei, water release. Water God's judgment. What the hell? Minato immediately grabbed one of his 3-pronged kunai and as he was about to go through the respective hand seals for his space-time barrier technique, his eyes widened as he took a closer look at the sheer volume of his son's jutsu. I can't teleport such widespread technique. He was broken out of his thoughts as the beast beneath him swung 5 burnt orange tails and smashed them violently on the ground. With a loud boom, the ground splitted in two making the wave destabilize itself and losing its proportion. Kikbi showed some surprise on its lidded eyes as he felt some water still washing his feet before narrowing it at the Uzushio's commander. To think he was still able to change this area of the mindscape even after I succeeded in stopping his technique truly remarkable. The beast watched in amusement as his summoner threw one of his special kunais towards the young man before going through a few hand seals. Ninm. Kunai Kage Bunshin. The lone kunai immediately shimmered and turned into hundreds of the same object. Naruto raised an eyebrow after taking a few deep breaths to calm himself. He had studied the man in front of him and that included, of course, what was coming next. Since his father didn't have the needed supplies for such technique to actual work effectively, he had instead covered it up by multiplying the kunai with a technique that branched from the Kage Bunshin. It was almost insulting, using a technique that he, himself, was a master of. Fool. Naruto took a deep breath, mixing a good chunk of chakra with the air that filled his lungs, before exhaling a turbulent gust of wind that covered the entire area in front of him, effectively sending the original kunai backwards and dispelling the copies. Ton. Tufkika, wind release. Supreme Typhoon. Namikaze Minato TSK''D at the failed attempt. Of course his son had to know how to effectively counter his famous technique, the Hiraishin. Well, it wasn't his own creation since it was the Nidaime Hokage, Senju Tabarama, who created this specific Jikin ninjutsu, but it was him that took it to another level. His mind was racing through several scenarios. He had basic knowledge about his son's skillset, not the entirety as he was practically thrown out of his son's mind, since the Kikbi's Jinchuriki had archived the perfect balance within his mind and body, thus increasing the defense towards whoever tried to get a glimpse on his memories. Time to get serious. Kikbi, destroy him. The commanding voice of Namikaze Minato irked the 9-tailed fox quite a bit, but he just went with the flow and ignored it. Since it's been like 16 years since the last time he let himself loose. Splash. The sound of the 3-pronged kunai hitting water reached everyone's ears before the Kikbi let loose an insane roar that made the whole mindscape tremble under its power. Naruto used his chakra to balance himself on the water while narrowing his icy blue eyes at the sitting form of his father on top of the beast's head. Oh? He's getting serious. Glancing behind the beast, his eyes landed on the seal embedded on a stone platform. Many huge trees behind said stone were being used as a barrier that limited the yang half of the Kikbi's space. Straining a little bit his eyes, he could make the form of worried slitted red eyes. Naruto's mind raced through several plans. Should I? It would be a welk shit. The massive claw literally destroyed where Naruto was standing not a second ago. If it wasn't for his fast reflexes, he would be the next Kikbi's meal. The Izukage's right-hand man couldn't dwell more on his predicament as blue and red chakra was being conjured right in front of the beast's mouth and he didn't need to think twice as Naruto immediately clapped his hands, fingers intertwined, spiking his chakra to dangerous levels as his opponent lunged the Bijigama towards him. Mokuton. Kami no T. Wood release. God's hand. The ground rumbled for a second before branches upon branches emerged from the ground, which had already sucked the water dry, emerging together and soon taking shape of a colossal hand. Such thing was literally half of Kikbi's size, but none of that mattered as the compressed ball of demonic chakra smashed against the huge hand made of wood. Kikbi's red slitted eyes widened in disbelief as the colossal hand closed itself into a fist as soon as the Bijgama touched it, and the only visible reaction was a slight hissing sound and some steam coming out of its sides. There was a smirk on Naruto's face that went unnoticed by both his opponents as a plan finally took place in his mind. With his hands still clapped, he grounded his teeth as several thick tendrils of wood emerged from the ground surrounding his form. Mokuton. Kamshimboku, wood release. Adamantine forest call. This was a technique he created himself by reading about his mother's powerful Kekkei Genkai Konfukusa, although its purpose was way different from the Uzumaki's chains. Instead, it only gave him the usefulness of the Sen. Idamura Sengen. The loud voice made him snap his eyes upwards as a massive bolt pure of chakra was heading his way. He sure is fast, but… Crack. The tendrils snapped to life as it seems to have its own mind, effectively blocking the almost instantaneous Rasengan, getting wide eyes from Minato who couldn't believe his creation was blocked just like that, and… How could he possess the Shodai's Mokuton? His senses skyrocketed seeing the small smirk displayed on his son's face before, and he immediately realized why. He was now basically surrounded by several thick wood tendrils, thanks to him being now so close. Receiving its master mental command, it sprung to life and lunged itself towards the blonde-haired adult who immediately started to dodge left and right, his reflexes being massively boosted by the incomplete Sage mode, which was something that Naruto took notice of. So, he didn't finish Sage's training. Naruto turned his gaze towards Kikbi who had what appeared to be a scowl on its face. The fact that he was in the presence of someone that wielded a jutsu capable of taming him had immediately taken its effect. He had to kill the brat before things got ugly. But speed that someone from his size shouldn't have, he was upon the small form of Naruto, ignoring the tendrils that were keeping Minato busy, his massive burnt orange claw ready to skew him alive. Naruto noticed the slight change on how the Kikbi was looking him up, so he was immediately prepared when it lunged forward, his hands blurred through hand seals before slamming his hands on the ground. Beaten. Daisaheki, mud release. Muddy water wall. Mud was something that he could easily create by attaining the mastery of both Doton and Suiton chakra. Its effects were instantaneous as a mud wall erupts from the ground blocking, albeit with some difficulty, the claw, but that was not all. Beaten. Jibandika, mud release. Landslide. The mud wall reacted to Naruto's mental command as it increased in size before it washed over Kikbi's entire form. His icy blue eyes could easily see the mud clinging to its target's body, making him smirk. Raiden. Chkrokich lightning release. 16 pillar bind not stopping his combination, his hands blurred through a few hand seals at high speeds before 16 massive pillars emerged from the ground around the 9 tails, which formed a giant oven-like structure, trapping the being while generating lightning, sending high electrical discharges all over its body. Making its prisoner roar in pain. Now, for the final step, purplish chakra surrounded Naruto's fingers before he slammed them on the ground beneath him as several intricate kanjis materialized there. Uzumaki Kenjutsu. Han no Sakusei, Uzumaki ceiling. Flame creation. The ground beneath the trapped Kikbi glowed slightly before flames, literally, erupted from the ground, its heat reaching even the wood tendrils still trying to capture Minato, shuddering from the discomfort of such hot temperatures. The oven-like structure cracked, showing the result of such combination made under 5 seconds. What was once the burnt orange body of the Kikbi was now crystallized mud. Naruto sent a confident smirk towards the still visible and moving slitted red-eyed before his form vanished in a blur of speed as electricity danced around his body. The lightning chakra stimulated Naruto's nervous system, enhancing his speed even more towards a certain location, which made Kikbi's slitted eyes widen as he finally come into realization. He was already expecting me to react that way when he unleashed his Mokuton, thus leading me to his trap. Though, knowing he couldn't defeat me by normal means, he planned to capture me for a few seconds, giving him enough time to. The Yin Kikbi just now felt how well he was outplayed. To come with such a plan in the heat of a battle, he's not an ordinary human. His battle mind bipedical process is off charts, but it's his quick thinking that makes him able to easily outsmart someone with way more experience than him in a battle. It wasn't just that, Kikbi's brain was now putting every piece together about the man that the offspring of his summoner is or became. Clarity of thought. The clear sense of a higher purpose, which requires a refined knowledge and common sense. Accuracy of thought. The ability to avoid errors or distortions of thought to approach a target at a macro level. Precision of thought. The ability to hit a target reliably and consistently at a micro level. Consistency of thought. The ability to avoid cognitive dissonance, thus maintaining precision and accuracy of thought. Relevance of thought. The ability to determine priorities and remain grounded and pragmatic, seen by how Naruto had maintained his posture after his and Minato's appearance. Intention of thought. The ability to exercise emotional intelligence by managing positive and negative emotions in order to remain objective, seen when he took deep breaths after his father's announcement that he would go back to serve Konoha. Ingenuity of thought. The ability to imagine the unimagined, who would have thought to use such combination out of the blue. And to think that's not all of it, he has mastered his mind to such levels that what many would say about what he's trying to do being a huge gamble or a suicidal idea, his brain instead has already cemented the idea and already thinking 10, 20 steps ahead. Truly remarkable, but a gigantic amount of demonic chakra was flared inside of Kikbi, immediately alerting Minato, who, by now, was very annoyed by wasting so much time of his sage mode while just dodging and destroying his attacker. He locked his blue eyes with a slitted red, inwardly shocked by the substance, trapping the beast for a certain amount of time, but then he narrowed his gaze towards the blonde's figure, moving at such speeds that would rival his, while in the Senendo, his eyes locked with an object, whereas Naruto would intercept in about a second before his lips twitched into a smirk. Naruto was racing towards a certain stone platform, his form was a blur even to any experienced shinobi. Almost there. The flash of yellow made his eyes widen in shock as a gigantic ball of pure chakra was coming from ahead of him, and with the amount of speed he was moving at he wouldn't be able to dodge, the impulse his body had was way too much, and because of the sheer size of that Rasengan, he couldn't possibly sidestep it. Shit, the kunai from earlier, I'm sorry Ka-chan. It's over. Sent Naruto's eyes were wide as he saw in slow motion the compressed ball making his way towards him. The wood trundles were not fast enough as the core of that Mokuton jutsu was too far to reach him. Idama Rasengan. Boom. Sunagakure no Sado. Gaara and Temari stood on top of one of the walls of Sunagakure, two pairs of emotionless eyes gazing over the massacre that just occurred for the last 30 minutes. Blood dripped from their ragged clothes, though it was not from them. After what looked like eternity, the latter spoke to think Kankurum of all people and Baki-sensei. It was a silent massacre nicely planned, Gaara being an insomniac, since he can remember had a nagging feeling that crept to his spine every time he turned his eyes towards his village, as the night winds chilled the hot temperatures in Suna, so he had decided to stay at the rooftop from the Kage's building, watching the moon as he did so many times since he became the Kazekage. But that had soon been interrupted by blank face masks Anbu that he knew all too well. Needless to say, he didn't hesitate to kill them all after they tried to threaten him to go with them or else. It didn't take long for Gaara to put 2 plus 2 together and finally come into a decision. Already knowing about some villagers' disagreement toward some of his calls when it came to their village, and now the fact that they're being helped by a secret Anbu organization that origins lies within the leaf, had made it all too easier. He had to leave this place. It was only after getting his sister, Temari, who, just like him, had that nasty feeling in her gut, that they left towards one of the secret exits known only to the Kazekage and Jounin commander. The moment they placed their eyes on the village, it was the moment that they knew that Sunagakure wasn't their home anymore. 70% of the shinobi forces were against them. The same army being led by none other than Baki and their so-called brother, Kankurum. They didn't have a single clue as to what happened with Kankurum, why was he siding with the enemies when siblings should stick together, no matter what, but it seems as everything was a lie. They would find out why another time. In due time, Temari in due time. Let's go. The blonde woman gave his brother a side glance, and Gaara could feel the questioning look he was getting, while his eyes remained at their former village the whole time, as if trying to uncover many questions that were giving him a big-ass headache. It's time to visit an old friend. Izuno Kuni. 2 figures were lazily walking on a specific road that would eventually lead to a temple which rumors had indicated of a large beast residing there. But these 2 knew better. The red clouds embedded on their black cloaks, unknown to most of the group's members, symbolized the rain of blood that fell in Omegakure, their leader's hideout and base of operations. The same cloaks protected them from the chilly winds, as a certain amount of mist was gradually getting stronger. Nana, Deidara-senpai, do you think the Sanbi is really there? The now revealed Deidara grunted at the loud and childish voice of his partner. While he was already used to his antics, his mind couldn't help but think if this was how his fellow and now deceased artist, in his own right, felt for him. The former Iwagakure-chiknin, taking a page out of his deceased partner, just grunted in acknowledged, totally missing the slight stiffening from his masked partner. The latter narrowed his single Sharingan eye backwards towards what seemed like nothing since they just came from there, but he knew better. They already know this might complicate things. Meanwhile, Ken's headquarters. They were in unit proud of their accomplishments. After all, it was thanks to their barriers that they maintained hidden for so long, it was them that sent anyone who got too close to their comfort that was misled out of Yuzashio's directions. They were the Hikages from Yuzashigakure as they had eyes everywhere. Proof of that was when, for the 50th time, since they publicly revealed themselves to the world, someone breached one of the barriers. Orochimaru, 2 persons trespassed the barrier number 14, between Yuzu and Mizu no Kuni. I was unable to identify their chakra in time. It seems whoever is there was aware of the barriers to nullify many of its functions. The only information I got was that they were both males and possess a huge amount of chakra. The referred man that had his face covered by a bird mask hummed and thought as a captain. He was made known about some secrets by the Uzukage himself that informed every single captain of their respective units so they could immediately and rationally come into a conclusion. 2 man's huge amount of chakra. Our 14th barrier is set nearby area surrounded by mist, and thanks to the latter, it made even more difficult to detect our barriers also. That specific location, there's too much coincidences to just let it go. It must be them. Looking over his unit all around several intricate array of seals while holding a hand seal, he addressed them. I'll notify Uzukage-sama. Report if there's any updates. Just as he was about to shunshun, another man in the room stiffened, getting narrowed eyes from the captain. What now? Brief barrier breached, 2 girls are getting closer to one of the secret passageway. This chakra Uzumaki. Eyes widened in shock for a split of a second before he took some deep breaths, beepizing this new development the best way he could. A diversion. Is it a coincidence that we are getting 2 breaches literally at the same time? Even if the barriers are way too far from each other, still. One's chakra is giving off a weird and nasty feeling, it seems somehow locked though. Ken's unit captain didn't think twice and immediately vanished from the headquarters to inform the Uzukage. 2 massive chakras heading towards Sanbi's former territory, at least from what the ancient book spoke of, and now another 2 unknown girls with Uzumaki blood running through their veins. Troublesome. Time skip. West Whirlpool passageway. After being informed of the situation at end, Jensi stood with his arms over his chest, awaiting the arrival of what he could already sense 2 lost Uzumakis, though he was blending in the water as he had decided to approach with caution. The 4-man squad containing a member of Kaidana, Yumibamzu and Sakura, led by the Ken's unit captain to confirm the identities, tracker, intelligence and torture, assault and barrier corps, respectively, stood in front of the hidden passage that would lead them to Uzushio, waiting for the imminent meeting. 2 silhouettes finally came into view, but Jensi's eyes narrowed at the slight shifting on one of the redhead's pair of eyes, locking with his for a millisecond. The sensor and quite adept too, she might even have unlocked Kagura's Shingon already. His eyes shifted to her other companion, getting a feel of her chakra, but the other one, that chakra that brat Orochimaru, to think he had a full-blooded and half-blooded Uzumakis in his ranks. Jensi wasn't said to have an bipedical mind on pair with Hiruzen Sarutobi for nothing. Pieces immediately started to come together in his mind before he finally sighed and vanished from his spot, whereas he appeared a second later in front of the Anbu squad, a few meters away from the duo. His cloak flapping with the chilly winds that surrounded the west side of the usually strong whirlpools, the water beneath them bending to their will and tamed for the time being. State your purpose, fellow Uzumakis. A strong, commanding voice snapped Karen and Tayuya out of their thoughts, as the former was still trying to get that glimpse of this old man's chakra. She had felt it while they were getting close, but as soon as she had tried to go further, it was like she got thrown out. We heard the rumors of Uzushio's rebuilding, and we immediately decided to look into it while betraying Orochimaru. The Anbu squad was on edge as soon as that man's name came out, but Jensi had remained calm while gazing over his kin's eyes. I see. His eyes hardened for a second, Karen and Tayuya tensed, but soon the same pressure that came from that veteran gaze vanished as the old man's eyes softened a bit, finally addressing them. Come. Few hours later, the moon washed over Karen and Tayuya, who were standing in a clearing, after marveling themselves at the beauty that was Uzashigakure. Their ancestors' home. Both of them were feeling fairly guilty on what they were about to do, but this was their mission. Years of the same motto being imprinted in their minds came into play. Serve Orochimaru. After misleading the Anbu team that was watching them with a well-placed sound game jutsu, they immediately ran to a clearing far away from praying eyes. No one could escape from Karen's sensor abilities. Giving a nod towards Tayuya, who's been awfully quiet since entering the village, she saw the same girl dropping 5 blood vials on a scroll with an intricate array of seals before she went slowly through the specific hand seals, slamming her hands on the kanji. 5 plumes of smoke materialized out of thin air. Daiaku Kuchius no Jutsu. Finally. Gosh, I was getting fucking bored sitting around Odo. You should watch your language, Seiko. HN. Karen, do you sense Naruto? The voices of Kidmaru, Seiken, Germ and Sasuke confirmed the success of the reversal summoning technique. Karen looked over Kimimaro, who didn't even pronounce a word. She didn't even acknowledge her crush's question or simply didn't hear it. Kimimaro was actually lost in thought. He was the captain of the famous Sound Four, or at least that was what they told him, since he would usually command them, and the Orochimaru's bodyguards would follow without complaints. He was actually still thinking over the conversation he heard after he got rescued after miraculously surviving the encounter against the current Kazekage, Gaara. Flashback. Orochimaru-sama, I've meant to ask you what will you do about Kimimaro's sickness, now that your former teammate, Tsunade, declined join us and instead, became the Gondaime. The pale man looked over his subordinate, who was finishing giving the essential supplies to Seiken, so that he wouldn't die, having already done the same to the other Sound 4 members plus Kimimaro. They were in a large room, full of medical equipment, even though it really wasn't for treatment but experiments. They were all unconscious after having almost lost their lives against Konoha's genins. It was at that moment when Orochimaru took his eyes off of the 5 men lying on their beds to look over his trusted subordinate that Kimimaro's finger twitched. Fukuku, my dear Kabuto-kun, you're perceptive as ever. Indeed, with Tsunade's decline Kimimaro's illness will only deteriorate though, that doesn't mean he's necessarily weak. With the right words, I will use him as a sacrifice when the time comes. Kabuto pushed his glasses up as an arrogant smirk spread on his lips, an habit that actually always gave Orochimaru the creeps. I see, by showing that you have indeed tried to help him by requesting Tsunade's help by any means, you'll cement his loyalties towards you, and as soon as you don't have any more usefulness for him. Orochimaru had a gleeful smile, a crazy glint on his reptilian eyes, continuing the former root member trains of thought. I will discard him. Flashback end. I will discard him, huh? The white-haired man looked over the beautiful and clear sky as he thought over, for the millionth time, about that conversation. His beliefs of that Orochimaru was actually truthful when he told him about knowing the methods to cure his illness were shattered on that night. He didn't have anything when the pale man found him and, as any other child, he was immensely happy when he finally found someone who actually cared for him. Maro. He had vowed to himself that he would help Orochimaru conquer his dreams, doing many things that would make even veteran Anbu hesitate. He basically and literally lived for Orochimaru until that night. Mimro. He had lost his sense of purpose with that betrayal, those words had inflicted more pain than when he was crushed by Gaara's sand. After that night until now, he's been living without any purpose, any objective, without any dream, without those it seemed like you were leading a meaningless life. Up until now, he had tried and failed to find a new purpose, a real purpose, which is a stable and generalized intention to accomplish something meaningful to himself and consequential to the world. In other words, he didn't want to be dependent on anyone. Kimimaro. Broken out of his thoughts, slightly surprised for losing himself when he was at an unknown place of all things, he looked over his shoulder to see only the Sound 4, Seiken being the one who called out for him. Geez, what the hell happened to you? Karen and Sasuke already went on their way to accomplish their mission. Let's g. Nai-san, look. There's people here, I bet they want to play too. The childish voice broke them out of their mini-bout and soon they all looked behind them to see 2 childs, one looked like between 4 to 5 years old, while the other, who seemed to be his older brother, looked 5 years older, around 10. The latter, being one of the most promising shinobis in the academy, immediately went on high alert, showing how different Uzushio's academy was compared to the other nations. Oda-2, go get father quick. The brown-haired child had only seen his big brother behave like that one time, and that was when he had broken his ankle when they were playing ninja. He didn't want to leave the playground, stubbornly saying that he was fine, but it was then that he saw his older brother's eyes' serious gaze that had made him comply. Gathering his wits, he immediately ran as fast as his little legs could. The forearm rudely appeared out of nowhere, seizing him in place. Now, where were you about to go, Chibi? Saikro, the 10-years-old boy, saw right after seeing his brother being held by that weird and frightening man with 6 arms, he hadn't even seen him move. Is that what a real ninja is? He leapt forward, intending to save his little brother, but soon stopped as his eyes were filled with horror as one of the man's arms brought a kunai, intending to impale his little brother, Kaikro. Nuo, stop. During the whole ordeal, Kimimaro was standing there as his light green eyes were looking almost through the older kid's eyes, who had captivated his interest immediately as soon as he realized what situation he was in. With no one to help him. Afraid. Powerless. Alone. But soon those eyes that held a huge amount of fear turned into one of determination to save his little brother. That was when it finally hit him. To protect someone close to you. Differently from what he felt from Orochimaru, which was something akin to respect, Kimimaro had developed a soft spot for another boy that he met during the last 3 years who he had grown close to. Go. His mind finally snapped as a new resolve filled his whole being, those light green eyes seemed to lit up after so many years of living in the depression. Though, the same eyes instantly widened in horror, unnoticed by anyone, as Kidmaru brought the kunai to the child's neck, the tip of the small weapon shining under the moonlight that watched the events occurring. Kimimaru's legs tensed before leaping at speeds that he himself didn't know he had, having finally came into a conclusion. To protect the younger generation, to protect Go from the likes of Orochimaru. His eyes soon turned to one of desperate as he realized one thing. I can't reach him in time shy. A strong, gloved hand gripped Kidmaru's hand, which contained the kunai, causing the Kagaya's clan member to stop in his tracks, its tip nicking the child's neck and drawing a little bit of blood, while the younger boy's eyes silently cried as tears freely cascaded down his cheeks. Oh? I see that Orochimaru has finally decided to make a move on Uzushio. Kidmaru's black eyes instantly narrowed on the man that appeared out of nowhere and stopped his move, but it was there and then that it turned one into fear as he gazed over the single and unmistakably three-tomoed eye. Sharingan ha Taki Kakashi. The revealed Kakashi held a lazy gaze over the man that had just tried to kill an innocent child, but if you took a closer look, a murderous glint was there not seen since his Anbu days. They're quite far from home. I guess Yuzukage-sama was correct that we shouldn't underestimate those Uzumaki girls that just came in. Flashback. I want you to follow those two girls that just came in. Even though it's true that they are indeed Uzumaki, the fact that the one called Karen half lied to me during her explanation is troublesome. Dismissed. Kakashi just lazily nodded at his new leader, but you could see his mask shifting slightly where his mouth was. He was frowning at that moment as it seems that his precious student couldn't get a rest wherever he went. He would make sure to deal with this swiftly. As he was the first Yuzuko no Shigasha, 5 Whirlpool Guardians, the Shodai. Flashback end. Ayuya widened her eyes in horror at that proclamation, instantly knowing what this meant. Karen was basically walking into a trap, and if it's true that the unknown Yuzukage knew about their motives, then she and Sasuke. Shit. I need to get Karen and retreat. Kakashi noticed the slight tensing of what he had concluded to be the one of the two girls that entered Uzushio by her description, and so, he moved accordingly. His hand sent jolts of electricity through Kidmaru's hand, who instantly let go of the kunai he held, before he was sent backwards by a flexible kick on his forehead. Due to the sudden shock, he had gotten paralyzed by a second, and that was all it took. The former Konoha's Jounin sent a look at the older kid who immediately took the hint and grabbed his brother, leaving the scene. His Sharingan eye spinning widely, looking over the 5-man team scratch that, now 6 as he saw a new figure shimmering out of Seiken's body. I still haven't recovered completely from my early fight with Naruto, this could be bad, from what I gathered in the past, they excelled in teamwork which makes it even more difficult. Seiken had actually a smirk on his lips after the initial shock of standing in front of a living legend passed. The light blue gray-haired had actually used his brains for once while looking at the scenario in front of him. Yuden, his brother, was already standing on his side, outside of his body. The sound 4 alone could probably defeat Kakashi, but the odds would triple if they included their cursed marks, but with Kimimaru, let's go. Formation H. Ayuya, while having her head spinning with thoughts on how Karen was holding up, still maintained her posture and went to her position, the others followed suit. No. Splash. Gwa. T. The dense white bone was thrusted where Seiken's heart should be, Yuden's eyes widened in terror at the ultimate and unexpected betrayal. Brother. Ayuya narrowed her eyes at Kimimaru's denial, already knowing that something was up with him since they had started this mission, but soon she realized what was going on as pieces started to come together. Was he planning all this along? No, impossible. Orochimaru would have known, right? Kakashi didn't know what to make out of this, but he wasn't one to look a gift horse in the mouth, it was one less enemy that he wouldn't have to worry about, still that begged the question. What the hell is going on? The Sharingan user watched a figure that had just murdered one of his comrades in cold blood, removing his bone weapon out of Seiken's chest, before gazing over the now 4 members. His cold and strong voice sent chills down everyone's spine. From now on, no one shall demand or order me around like a puppet or a weapon. From now on, I'll live for what my heart desires. Meanwhile, few miles away. Karen and Sasuke were already halfway through. Karen could sense the massive chakra that was locked inside of a specific location. She doubted any ordinary sensor would be able to get whoever was on that location. Talking about that chakra, she had never felt such potency all in her life, the man currently following her didn't hold a candle compared to that monster. Also, the fact that he was constantly asking how long it would take them to reach the location almost made her wish that whoever is in there, whoever is Uzumaki Naruto for that matter, would squash him. Almost since he was still her crush, even if that feeling subsided a lot during the last years. The wind seemed to pick up the speed, forcing them both to shield their eyes while stopping on their track. Karen almost had her jaws drop seeing the familiar face in front of them. How? I didn't even sense him. Not just that, but what is he doing here? Does he Tayuya? The eyes widened, she immediately took a step back as the figure in front of her spoke. Parent-chan, you still are a few centuries too young to hold even a candle against my sensory abilities. The redhead was about to reply, her brash attitude playing a big factor on that decision, but she was promptly interrupted. Step aside, you bag of bones, or I will not hesitate to kill you. The chilly, arrogant and dark voice of her companion made her involuntarily take a step back as her sensors went high alert at the shift in Sasuke's chakra. It was dark. But the ground beneath the newcomer cracked as a massive amount of chakra was expelled out of his body. It dwarfed Sasuke's by at least 10 times. Boy, I'll give you one chance. Get out of my village or I'll destroy your miserable life. That calm voice, that chakra of his still rising, Karen knew right there and then knew that this man was on another level altogether. Bei-chan, what could you do? Do you really think you stand a chance against me? Sasuke's Sharingan roared to life, but that soon turned into a grave mistake as he took a glimpse of the insane amount of chakra going off of that old man. Though, his blood pumped at the prospect of fighting a worthy opponent, this would make a nice warm-up before he takes down the dope. Parents almost fainted as soon as those words left Sasuke's mouth, followed by another spike of chakra. It was unbearable for her, as she wasn't those ordinal sensor ninjas, she could feel everyone's chakra to a high degree, and this man was putting even Orochimaru to shame. Uzumaki Hijutsu, Uzumaki's secret technique. Very well. Then, I shall show you why I'm the Yondai Meizukage. Karen immediately leapt backwards, maintaining a good amount of distance from that monster, as she saw him clapping his hands, moisture in the air gathered at speeds that surpassed even the Nidaime Hokage, not that they knew. Suiton, water release. Sasuke noticed the amount of chakra built up, and even though they still haven't started, rolls of sweat formed on his forehead. This might have been a huge mistake after all. The Bakurik no Jutsu. Great waterfall flow. Act 2. Mindscape. Senm. Chm Adamura Sengen. Naruto had already closed his eyes, bringing his arms forth, unconsciously, to defend himself, but even in his mind, he knew that this would get him gravely injured if not dead. Jensi Jiji Kakashi Sensei, my village. Ha-chan. Golden chains wrapped around Naruto's whole form in a protective manner as the giant ball of chakra clashed against the hard metal. Ooh. The whole mindscape shook under its power, but soon Minato, who still was plunging the Rasengan, had this feeling in his gut that told him something was going wrong. Shifting his eyes to the massive beast that had already freed himself had wide eyes while looking at his son's direction. Dispersing the Rasengan, he was immediately aware why something felt wrong, very wrong. Golden chains still wrapping protectively around Naruto, his eyes followed the direction where they came from. Wide blue met murderous purple eyes. You'll not harm my son. Uzumaki Hijutsu, Suiton. Bakurik no Jutsu. Uzumaki secret technique, water release. Great waterfall flow. A humongous wave of water materialized out of nowhere, and Sasuke's mind still hadn't registered such phenomenon happening in front of his eyes before his Uchiha's instincts kicked in and went through his own hand seals, biting his thumb and drawing some blood in the process before he slammed the same hand on the ground. Uchiha no Jutsu. Taka. An array of seals materialized on the ground before it exploded in a plume of smoke, followed by a high-pitched screech taking him into the air. Though that wasn't enough, as even then the massive wave crashed against his summon, such was the sheer size and volume of it, which he used as an anchor to propel him even more higher as he jumped out of its reach. His blood-red eyes still caught the betrayed look sent to him by the bird before it dispersed back to the summoning realm. Another spike of chakra made him narrow his eyes towards his opponent before his face lost all its color. 5 huge dragons made entirely of water had their glowing pure yellow eyes set on him. He had flashbacks from the battle between Zabuza and his former sensei, Hot Aki Kakashi, and he could confirm that these monsters were at least 3 times taller and bulkier than those he had witnessed before. Suiton. Suriken Garenden no Jutsu. Water release. Water dragon quintuple step technique. As soon as those words escaped Jensi's lips, the dragons lunged forward at the falling Sasuke, who by now was going through a handful of hand seals before he too spat 5 dragon-headed fireballs. Haten. Murka no Jutsu. The amount of chakra he had to put forth so he could at least hit a stalemate made him finally snap out of his shock of battling a clearly Kage-level opponent, as he had to start taking this seriously or else. Soon, his foot splashed against the water, using his chakra to balance himself on top of it. His mind tried to come with a proper plan to get rid of this unexpected opponent before he could kill his former teammate. Thanks to the collision between high level of fire and water techniques, a dense mist surrounded the area, making his Sharingan eyes narrow. TSK, this old man seems to hold a high affinity towards Suiton, as well as huge reserves of chakra. I'm at a disadvantage if I keep battling him here, but this mist isn't helping. At least he can't see me as well, giving me more tim. Words of Jensi Uzumaki from moments ago flashed on his mind. Parent-chan, you're still a few centuries too young to hold even a candle against my sensory abilities. Eyes white and shy. Indeed. A whisper behind him interrupted his cursing and realization before a blade of pure water was thrust on his spine as blood started to leak out of his mouth. Suiton. Riksuism, water release. Flowing spear. Jensi Uzumaki looked upon what was once upon a time his pupil's best friend with narrowed eyes, his hand which was engulfed in a water-like spear was still in the same place. You never had the chance, boy. You're lacking many things to be even called a proper shinobi, you've made many mistakes throughout your short life, and that includes, of course, breaking ties with my student or whom you once called best friend. Jensi watched as the raven-haired boy coughed a gob of blood, he noticed a smirk growing on his bloodied mouth, though, he continued. But this was a grave and also your last mistake coming to my village and thought killing my family. Just as Jensi was about to twist his water blade and remove it, the Uchiha's body exploded itself in a shower of electricity, and because of the water surrounding them, it amplified the damage on the Yondaime Yuzukage, who was too close to escape. Raiden. Kage Bunshin, huh? The elder Uzumaki glanced to his right side, where a visibly out-of-breath Sasuke was gazing at him. You underestimated me, old man. You should have known better than looking directly into the eyes of an Uchiha. Sasuke gritted his teeth at the strain he felt on his eyes, to think he had to waste so much chakra on a mere genjutsu that so he could buy a single second to switch up with the Kage Bunshin. He knew he had to put a whole lot in it because he had felt this man's huge amount of chakra and also because he was a good sensor if what he had done to Karen was any indicator. His eyes gazed upon Jensi Uzumaki falling to his knees, electricity coursing his whole body, while he took a few steps to finish the current Kage, as his right hand caught the hilt of his shakudo, ready to take the head off his shoulders. It's over. Swoosh. Izu no Kuni. Mobarashi no Giant. Two figures finally stepped into a massive lake, one in midair on top of a clay bird, while the other on foot. A dense mist was surrounding the area, and if they didn't have come prepared for this situation, they would have been placed in a genjutsu a few hours ago, thanks to this almost natural fog. Mobarashi no Giant, the illusionist fog temple, or best known to them as Sanbi's home. After one succeeding in dismissing the genjutsus that comes with a dense mist, they would be rewarded by the vast amount of demoniacal chakra permeating in the area. Would they be considered your normal shinobi, their knees would be trembling just by the mere feeling of almost infinite power. A single Sharingan eye was spinning in excitement as he focused on the large shadow in the middle of the lake. This was it, another piece for him to collect. Shifting his eyes towards his companion, he was about to give the imminent orders to start the plan, but his body suddenly stiffened before his single eye narrowed, dispersing the untold and unfamiliar genjutsu placed upon him on instinct, and a second later, a pure white blade literally went through his body, followed by an unknown foe. He noticed that Deidara was already in the air, escaping a random Kaiten ninjutsu. Glancing at the new problem, his mind was already racing through many plans, while his eye focused on the familiar and whom he was expecting to come, whirlpool symbol proudly displayed on the headband and bests of 5 shinobis. Izushio Anbu, he grunted in a deep voice out of reach from Deidara's ears, while one of the Anbu who had a bird mask, the same man that had been notified about the breaches in at least 2 areas, narrowed his eyes at his enemies in thought. It seems I and Yuzukage-sama were right about the enemies' identities after all. Former Iwagakure shinobi, Deidara, and this man, he is his narrowed dark brown eyes, took a glimpse within the hull of the Akatsuki's member orange mask, and as he expected, a swirling Sharingan was dangerously eyeing his team. Flashback. Izukage-sama, reporting 2 breaches. 2 unknown identities, both males and large amounts of chakra identified, without a doubt heading to Mobarashi no Giant. The other breach was done by 2 unknown but certainly Uzumakis, both females, heading towards the west gate. They will be crossing the passageway in 10 minutes. Your orders. Jensi hummed in thought at the expected and unexpected news. The expected being these 2 unknown males, his mind had already concluded them being members of the Akatsuki, he would have gone personally there to deal with them, but finding 2 Uzumakis was way more important. The reason was simple. They were his family. Even if they have secondary intentions towards his village, the old man knew he could change their mindset. In his lifetime, he still hasn't found a single Uzumaki who didn't prioritize their family first over other things. You got 5 minutes to pick up a team and head to Mobarashi. Your main focus is to stall them for some time until I arrive. As soon as you make contact with them, use this sealing tag if, and only if, one of the invaders has an orange swirling mask, understood? His tone was rigid and commanding, expected from someone who leads an entire village. The Anbu captain saluted his leader while pocketing the sealing paper in his pouch before vanishing to get a team. Flashback end. The captain made a single hand seal as he saw his opponent walk out of his blade's reach like it wasn't there, feeling his own chakra wash over his lungs. His other hand made some discreet signs towards his teammates before a torrent of water was expelled out of his mouth towards the single Akatsuki member in front of him. Suiton. Miserapa. It was quite fast the whole proceeding. If he didn't have his Sharingan he probably would have to block it, but as it is he saw through it miles away, and so he immediately jumped to his right side while going through his own hand seals and expelling 7 small fireballs towards the Anbu that had surrounded the captain and left Idara alone in the air. Payton. Hasenka. His single eye watched as the same fireballs were blocked by a water wall that rose in front of the squad. He idly noticed that the fog became even more denser, but that didn't matter. He would see that his plan succeeded in the end. Up in the air, the blonde-haired Akatsuki member shouted in pure glee as he held up a single seal. Many clay figures already upon the area where the water wall rose. Hatsu. Boom. That was too easy to be true. Toby, not that they knew, watched the explosion rocking in front of him. His mind had already known that they were planning something, and that explosion didn't even faze them. He was proven correct as golden barriers suddenly surrounded them. Deidara, being in the air, felt a pressure wash over him before his form and that of his dragon clay smashed into the ground and an immense gravity settled upon the area where the barrier covered. This is his blood-red eye tracked the golden barrier, more amused than worried. The large explosion of chakra that he felt probably coming from the captain didn't faze him, but he knew that the man somehow was responsible for this nicely done fuinjutsu. A Kekai, huh? He too felt a massive weight on his shoulders, but someone who has trained under the real Uchiha Madara, this was child's play. He finally heard his opponent talking, his voice being heard all over the place. Fuinjutsu Kekai. Chiryoku no Sushitsu, ceiling barrier. Nature of gravity. The Anbu captain coughed a bit at the high input of chakra, his mind was already racing through many plans. This was what he had initially planned if he ever faced the supposed masked man. He had to stall. He wasn't naive to think that he or his teammates could take him out. He had felt a glimpse of this man's chakra after all. But they were proud Yuzashio's Anbu members. Their teamwork were on another level altogether in comparison to the other villages. This man might be way out of their league alone, but together they could and would get enough time so the reinforcements could arrive in time. Now let's see what you're really capable of, leader of the Akatsuki. Back with Uchiha Sasuke vs Uzumaki Naruto. Swoosh. Izukudo easily decapitated the supposed Uzashiagakure's leader. Sasuke breathed a sigh of relief. After all, this old man had made him use a whole lot of chakra. In the end, an Uchiha would always come on the top even against the odds. Sasuke, behind you. Aaron's shout resounded on his ears, but sweat rolled out of his forehead as a water-based scythe was placed in front of his neck. His heart beating tripled as he realized he couldn't move his own body. Many kanjis were now taking over his body, making him remember the time he fought against a random guy who was proficient in the sealing art, but somehow he could feel that this fuinjutsu was on another level. Behind him stood Uzumaki Naruto with the same expressionless face. His right hand held the scythe in front of his opponent's neck, while 2 fingers from his left one were poking the Uchiha on his spine. The fingers being the reason why his body couldn't move. Fuinjutsu. Tengoku, sealing jutsu. Imprisonment. You fought well, young Uchiha. But, as I said before, you're way too yo. The massive explosion made the whole ground shake. Everyone had to gather chakra into their feet to get a hold of themselves. The Uzukage had his eyes widened as it looked upon the form of the divine shrine of Uzashiagakure that was still up to this date as good as new. Keyword being was as blackish smoke was the only thing his eyes could see at the moment, but not a second later his sensory abilities picked upon the largest chakra signature he has ever felt coming his way fast. This chakra, it's… Sasuke's mind still hadn't registered the explosion, his near-death experience still fresh on his mind. His Uchiha instincts finally took over and finally forced his body to move, using the fact that the earthquake-like had distracted his opponent and immediately jumped away from him, his body crashing on Karen's left side who stood still. Shocked to the core as her sensory abilities finally kicked in and revealed the monster that was coming their way. She ignored her companion's words, nor the tingling on her left arm that was Sasuke, who was biting it to replenish his chakra and fatigue. This poor monster, what is this chakra? Her whole world froze as a golden blur crashed upon the field between her and the veteran Uzumaki, a heavy voice and tone from the same person. This is where it ends, Sasuke. And then. A heavy and massive killing intent washed over her and Sasuke's shoulders, getting them on their knees, or in Sasuke's case, face on the ground. The red beauty was shivering in pure fear as scenes of her imminent death flashed on her mind. Sasuke was not too much behind. Was this the same dope? What was with the golden aura around his body? What was this power? He had immediately caught on to the fact that standing in front of him was his so-proclaimed rival. His voice was more mature, but it was definitely him. The pressure had even affected a bit the current Uzumaki, but the old man stood strong as he glanced upon the new form of his pupil. His mind had already guessed what probably happened thanks to the amount of chakra that wasn't there before his fellow Uzumaki went into the shrine. Also. So you finally met them, huh? He wanted to hear the whole story as his curiosity was almost killing him, but he had other things to do and places to be. A mark on his right shoulder flared for the third time, and his eyes steeled before addressing his favorite student. I'm being called on another front, I guess you can take care of this one, right? Naruto's golden and frog-like eyes shifted towards his elder and sensei for a moment before going back to the refreshed Uchiha, who was still breathing hard because of the heavy pressure. Don't worry. The elder Uzumaki nodded once before his form dispersed in the wind. Sasuke widened his Sharingan eyes as he couldn't detect where his opponent went and his mind clicked. He was holding back. Genryu-sensei was probably fighting with at least 20% of his overall strength. If possible, his eyes widened even more as he glanced back towards his former teammate. You? Read your thoughts. Not likely. You're just that easy. Sasuke gritted his teeth at being so underestimated. He finally regained his breath. This was the dope, even if he was a little more powerful, he shouldn't be stronger than him. He trained extensively under a Sannin during many years. You'll pay, Naruto. A single hand seal was made before his chest puffed out, a large fireball was expelled out of his mouth towards his former teammate who raised a single eyebrow. Pain. Gakukick. I see still the same Sasuke. But two golden arms shot out of his golden aura enveloping the fireball and crushing it with its bare hands. So, this is Kurama's chakra heh, not bad. A smirk slowly formed on his face before his hands blurred through a small chain of hand seals. What shocked Sasuke were the golden chakra hands going through its own as well. A fox-like head resembling the QB slowly manifested out of his golden aura before it shot a huge flamethrower out of its mouth just as soon as Naruto clapped his hands. Pain. Akuma no Han, fire release. Demonic flames. Dawn. Ranrakatsuyoku, wind release. Turbulent pressure. Shakutan. Hajish plus Hakai, scorch release. Fiery destruction. It was all made under 2 seconds. The massive whirlwind clashed against the flames fueling its power and size, whereas an above-average torrent of flames became, literally, a huge wave of purplish flames heading towards his former teammate. Sasuke portrayed a shocked visage at the usage of such combination, the wave already upon him. For the second time, his life flashed before his eyes before both of them bled, and then. He screamed. Ah. Purple chakra surrounded the Uchiha. By now he had both eyes closed as he continued to scream to the heavens. Around him, a skeleton-like shield manifested around his form before he got washed by the flames and then, an explosion. The Uchiha who thought being death opened his eyes to see the whole field burn down to the core. He was on his knees, sweating like rain and panting hard. Stepping sounds made him snap out of his shock and look up to see the culprit behind everything. Uzumaki Naruto. How did he obtain such power? His former teammate used to be always far behind him, and now it's completely the opposite. More importantly, how did I survive the whole explosion? The step stopped right in front of him as the blonde-haired supported now a mixed look of both curiosity and amusement. I see, so that's the Manjukum Sharingan, and that shield from earlier I heard about it, was it Susanoo? Fascinating, but not good enough. Sasuke, who by now was shocked at the knowledge that the supposedly dumb and loud that was Naruto in the past, now looked like he'd received the wisdom of gods, halted. His Sharingan evolved. He had read the stone tablet at the Uchiha's Naka shrine that one could acquire such power by killing his best friend. Best that rule doesn't apply to me, heh. Dot. The smirk came over his features before he let out a pulse of chakra that pushed Naruto back a few meters. Finally standing at his full height, Sasuke was awed at the improvement and the clarity of his vision. With this, I can. Pain. Han no Hertsu, fire release. Flame burst. His chest bulged before sending out a burst of flames towards Naruto who stood still on his spot, his golden aura receding back, though his eyes now gaining an orange pigmentation around them. Senendo. Needing some senjutsu chakra into his palms, Naruto sent forth a burst of pure chakra towards the flames, which upon colliding it dispersed into nothingness. Senm. Kimf no Tenahira, Sage Art. Gale Palm. The ground cracked as Naruto leaped into the air, such was the pressure of his chakra, his chest bulging, while he went through a small chain of hand seals, electricity starting to materialize around his hands as he intoned. Senm. Suitin Hatm, Sage Art. Surging Sea. An enormous surge of water was expelled out of his mouth as the electricity around his hands became even more intense, with the senjutsu chakra mixing with his Raiten chakra, he finally finished the last hand seal. Senm. Kaminari Gnome Den, Sage Art. Lightning's discharge. The sound of a thunderclap made the Uchiha step back in fear at the humongous sea wave conjured with electricity. His pride though held strong as his 3 Tomoe Sharingan started to spin rapidly before it converged into the pattern of the unmistakably Manjikam Sharingan. Again, a skeleton surrounded his form, but this time he followed his instincts and pushed even more chakra onto his right eye, which started to bleed. A wall of black flames suddenly sprung out to meet against the sea wave, giving him enough time to escape its trajectory. But a whisper behind him made his eyes widen. Weak. Crack. Following the whisper, a booming and cracking sound was heard, and glancing back, his eyes widened even more at seeing his skeleton cracking under a single punch from Naruto who, without him knowing how, got behind him. That didn't matter as he was rudely sent forward and it finally registered where he was sent to. Shit. He couldn't maneuver himself and his eyes just had the time to register the massive explosion of the clashing between the earlier jutsus and him being in the middle of it. Naruto finally reached the ground in time to admire his work, his mind reaching several conclusions all the while. I see, Susanoo for all its advantages can't withstand such powerful taijutsu mixed with senjutsu chakra. Though I wasn't able to completely crush its shield, it still cracked a bit and I didn't even have time to build much chakra into my punch. He raised an eyebrow at the hole made by the explosion and noticed some glimpses of purple chakra. So, he actually survived that. The black flames were still dispersing, the water from his earlier jutsu all but vaporized. If he had to guess, there was some mist around the clashing, so his guess was probably right. The Uzukage's second hand released a breath before his eyes hardened and his form was enveloped in electricity. Time to end this one-side rivalry once and for all. On the bottom of the hole, Sasuke stood panting even harder, face against the ground. He was out of options, chakra or ideas. His skeleton shield all but destroyed, the purple chakra that contained Susanoo that had saved him was now dispersing. I have to get out of here. He was about to stand up before a near-eye on his spine made him spit out a good amount of blood and slammed right back onto the ground he was on. He idly felt electricity coursing through his veins right after he got crushed. Finally, he heard his probably last opponent speak his mind. This is the end. For all the pain you brought me in the past, for trying to take away someone from me I hold precious in my heart, in the form of my mentor and clansman, and mainly for invading my home. Goodbye Sasuke. Sasuke could only widen his charcoal eyes, his manjikam had turned off because he couldn't sustain it any longer, watching as his former teammate removed his sword from the sheath, which you remember, it being owned by Orochimaru, the Kusanagi, before it was plunged on his back, right through his heart, and he knew no more. Uchiha Sasuke was dead. One less. As Naruto stood up from the corpse of the Uchiha with a faraway look probably reminiscing about something, his orange pigmentation still in place, but in the next second he felt a strange sensation washing over his body and his eyes narrowed onto the corpse again as his sensory abilities augmented with the sage mode detected something else. What's this feeling? He noticed his eyes stinging a bit but shook it off. Never noticing it turning blood red for a moment before it got back onto the golden frog-like eyes of sage mode. In his mindscape, Kurama widened his eyes as he remembered this feeling, or better yet, he could never forget this chakra. This is Indra. Far away from Sunagakure. A pair of Sharingan eyes opened to look at the moon, he could tell that it was about to rain which surprised him a bit as until now there was nothing that foretold that it would rain on this day. There was this feeling as well, something was about to or already happened. The winds intensified, brushing his red cloud robe he was enveloped on, and the same vibe he was getting suddenly tripled. Uchiha Itachi, for the probably first time, threw the caution to the wind and got up from the rock he was sitting on and started to walk towards somewhere he knew would give him the answers he seeks. Behind him, a blue shark-faced giant man raised an eyebrow at the random action of his partner. Itachi-kun, what's up? His partner didn't stop on his tracks and his eyebrow raised even higher at the strange behavior, though he let out a breath as he got a reply. I've got something to do. I'll get in touch with my crows. His eyes followed the back of his partner until he left his field of vision before he let out a sharky chuckle, though confusion was still very clear on his eyes. I'll never understand him. Back with Naruto. Betting over the strange sensation he got as he would eventually get the answers from Kurama, his golden eyes locked onto the red-hair woman that was looking at him with her mouth open, clutching a tree, unable to speak. In her mind, though it was a different story. Too much, that's too much chakra. So bright and so dark as well, it's like a perfect mix, like yin-yang, not too bright nor too dark. His presence too, it's like standing in front of a god. Steps coming her way brought her out of her state and she clutched the tree even harder, but to her relief, stopped a few meters away from her. So, you're in Uzumaki, huh? That's why Jensi-sensei didn't outright kill you before he left. Eren flinched at his emotionless tone, but the small smile that came over his features and the next few words made her let out a sigh of relief. Come with me, your family after all. Few kilometers away, with Kakashi. Kakashi stood still, watching as the now former Odo shinobi took down the last member of the Sound Four with a well-placed bone on the fattest member, Jirobo. He was a spectator during the whole fight, it was easy to notice that this Kimimaro was on another level. The green eyes of the last Kagaya member finally settled on him. Sharingan no Kakashi, I see no reason for us to fight, since you are no longer my enemy. I wish you goodbye for now. Kimimaro leaped away, knowing he would not get a reply, not that he cared anyway, still his ears picked up on the last words from the legendary, in his own right, ninja. Hope someday you can meet my precious student and the savior of this world, Uzumaki Naruto. You have a lot in common after all. The white hair didn't stop in his tracks, but those words got imprinted on his mind, but first, he had to get acquainted with someone. Uzumaki Naruto, that loudmouth orange brat, huh? He shook those thoughts away, he had to get another orange brat, but this one was not loudmouth, but way too silent instead. Do go, wait for me. The end. So how was this part? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this part with your friends, and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.